It's 6 o'clock. I am calling the, what is today's date? June 30th, 2025 Select Board meeting to order. The first order of business is to elect Select Board officers. Do I have a motion?
I move to elect Mark Howell as Select Board Chair.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's switch chairs.
It's the dance.
It's the dance.
Should have been more ready for this.
No, really. You unpacked.
Yeah. Okay. Meantime,
Oh, just plugged in.
yeah, but I can just slide it in.
Okay. I move to elect Wendy Ravelli as clerk of the Select Board.
Do I hear a second?
I'd like to have some discussion around it. if That's
Go
right.
Yeah, so we can have a second
Yep.
and then discussion.
Second.
Second and discussion.
In discussion, yes, okay. So before we take a vote on the Select Board Clerk, I would like to put forth my interest in being considered. So I think over the course of the past year, as a Select Board, we've done a number of good things. I think for myself personally, taken on some of the things like flag policy, town meeting study committee, APP 10, been able to attend every meeting with diligent and accurate meeting note comments, and more importantly, I think just, following good process and governance. I think that I bring a balanced and inclusive perspective. If I was considered for the clerk position, I think that I would be able to provide some constructive challenge and questions. I did receive the highest number of votes in the election that I was part of, and so I believe I have strong support and well representation. And I think also importantly, it's good to have some balance in our perspectives across the town. And I think that I bring a little bit of a different voice and not always sort of the same perspective as the rest of the Select Board. Certainly want to be able to provide challenge around some of the challenges that we have in finance and making sure that we're bringing the spending and taxes to a holistic perspective on some of the plans we have around the town. And I feel like I would have the opportunity to really sort of challenge the chair and work with the chair, and work with the rest of the Select Board, and really work with the rest of the town to make it the best that it can be. So I would put forth my, not nomination, but consideration for being part of the Select Board and part of the discussion here.
Any other comments? Paul?
It's my first meeting, and I've observed the functioning of the Select Board for quite some time, and I think we have two very good candidates for the clerkship. That's sort of my commentary on this.
Okay.
I'll comment. Cameron, I do believe that you do bring a balanced perspective to the conversations here at the Select Board, and I value that. I think you can do that by being a seated member, which you've done very well up till now. The clerk's position is more of an admin type position, which requires quite a bit of back office work or administrative work, and I think that given your schedule and given well, I'll stop there. So I support Wendy for the role, and I nominated her because I think she's also done a lot of work with the town on many of the boards that you mentioned yourself, and I also know that she's got a lot of experience in running meetings, running committees, chairing committees, and I'd like to give her the chance to be the clerk.
I guess my only comment is, Cameron, you've been contributing quite a bit, and I don't think that the clerk role actually changes that at all. So would hope that you keep that in mind as well, because I think that's true.
Yeah, I think historically, historically the clerk role has oftentimes maybe been a precursor to, becoming the chair of the Select Board. So you know, to the extent that that's something that we, you know, I mean, again, it's saying it's more of an administrative position, maybe I think is not always historically been the case. So, you know, to the extent that we want to, you know, talk about how that doesn't necessarily lead to the chair role, you know, I think that's just another perspective.
Yeah.
Right, it's true.
I think that's a fair observation. It often does, but it doesn't have to lead to that decision. And that's a decision that each board makes at the beginning of the year. And I also value your contributions, and I'm pleased that you're interested in taking on the additional workload, and I think that speaks well of you and the contributions that you've made. I'm also personally comfortable with selecting Wendy, but I also recognize that there will be probably times when I'll be absent, or you know, during the year, and if you'd like to step in those occasions, that would be really helpful. Any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? All those in favor of Wendy being the select board clerk, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries 4-1. Okay. First, I'd like to just briefly thank Mary for her leadership and her services in this last year. The chair role is a load, and it's appreciated that people take their turns doing it, and it's a good reason for us to change that every year. I'd also like to thank Wendy for taking on the role of the clerk. That is an important role in terms of making sure that the business of the board is efficiently executed. I'd like to welcome Paul. It's been a while since the election, but
Years.
you know, congratulations. You know, it's you got the bonus of a shortened term, I guess. And I'd like to thank all of the board members for entrusting me with the role of chair. May I do well with it. We're going to have public comment now. I see there are quite a few people in the room. Public comments would be for 3 minutes for items that are not on the agenda. Would anybody like to step forward for public comment? Mr.
Matt
Johnson.
21 Winthrop Street, member of the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, and we'll be talking about that later, but right now talking as a member of the Concord Housing Foundation. And I'm just here tonight because you are in receipt of letters, both from the Housing Trust and from the foundation, urging the Select Board to dedicate the funds that Newbury Court has offered as part of its agreement with the town to affordable housing purposes. And there are mechanisms to do that, as Carrie LaFleur has pointed out, that you can establish a gift fund that dedicates those funds to that purpose. And this is important because this arrangement was made in lieu of Newbury Court providing attainable housing on its own site. And it fulfills a gap, I think, that we have. So I just wanted to urge your consideration of that. I do understand that now that matter is up for discussion at your next meeting, July 14th, I believe it is. So just noting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anybody else?
Yes.
Ms. Nero.
Yes, Christine Denaro, 189 Commonwealth Avenue. I'd just like to share a few comments about Giroux Park. It seems appropriate to have an official opening for Giroux Park. The Giroux family is very interested in this, and they would love to see a plaque on a boulder commemorating their family. There has been a precedent for this, as there is currently a plaque on a boulder dedicated to the Anderson family at the parking lot at Rideout, where Roy Anderson lived for many years. It is unfortunate that the boulder is currently hidden by overzealous greens. Both families sold their plots to the town for hometown discount, and it is important for us to show these families our appreciation. In preparation for this opening, I understand that there is still $84,000 left from Phase 1 that has not been used. I suggest and encourage the Select Board and/or the Recreation Commission to use this money immediately to purchase benches and picnic tables. The current picnic tables and benches at Giroux Park have seen better days. We appreciate that they were temporarily provided so that we could have a place to sit at Giroux Park, but it is time to purchase more appropriate ones. Giroux Park should have benches similar to the benches in West Concord Center, and the picnic tables should reflect the importance and pride that we have for this beautiful property. We have $84,000, let's use it now. Let's put together a plan as to where the picnic tables and benches should be located so that they can be put there this summer. Giroux Park is getting a lot of use. Let's continue to make it more user-friendly and comfortable. Phase 2 has now been funded with CPC dollars to move forward with a design for a boat launch/fishing pier and a playground. This money is also supposed to be used for benches and picnic tables. I understand a consultant is required for this project. Given that it is already July, or just about, is there a plan to request more CPC funds by the September deadline to ensure that this project continues to move forward at a steady pace so that Phase 2 can be completed in a reasonable amount of time? Thank you for your attention to Giroux Park.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rich?
Rich Feely, 347 Lexington Road, speaking on behalf of the Concord Housing Foundation. I just want to back up what Matt said and point out some things that I think you may be aware of, but maybe you aren't. And the first is that over 25 years, the population in Concord will increase around 60% if you're over 80 or over 90. You can call that the curse of the boomers if you want, but we can't all live at Newbury Court. We can't afford it. Secondly, the town recognized that over a decade ago when we started out to try and create affordable assisted living at Junction Village. For reasons I won't rehash, we didn't do that, but now the need is even more urgent. As Matt pointed out, the Newbury Court management made this agreement, rather than trying to figure out how we could all agree what's affordable or attainable in their own facility. And finally, I know the language in the development agreement refers to funding programs for elders, including medical care and assistance, but I'd like to point out that we have national programs in Medicare and Medicaid, God willing, that really do provide coverage for the elderly. But the funding for affordable housing units, other than some random tax credits, isn't there. We need to help make this happen, and I think committing the money being paid by Newbury Court is the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feely.
Well, is
Yes.
it better for me to be here or at the table?
That's fine.
I'm Linda Neiman, 59 Mallard Drive. I'm a co-coordinator of Mothers Out Front Concord, and I submitted a letter to the Select Board and Carrie LaFleur on behalf of our leadership team, and I would like to read it.
Sure.
Dear Town Manager Carrie LaFleur and Select Board members, drive like your kids live here is a common sign posted in neighborhoods. The assumption that underlies this admonition is that reckless humans are the sole cause of crashes by driving poorly or not being alert while walking or biking. But the third actor in a crash is never mentioned: road design. When a crash occurs, we should ask, how can this location be modified to prevent the next crash? Because another crash will inevitably occur without action. The most recent incident on Upland Road, where a runner with her dog was struck by a driver, is on a stretch of road known to be dangerous to pedestrians. Neighbors have petitioned the town for many years for road calming to slow drivers, without any concrete action beyond a cut-through study. The Williams Road crash has had no temporary measures put in place, so that even at the time of the writing of this letter, young girls unaware of the danger have set up a lemonade stand at that same location. So what can be done? We must create solutions that account for human behavior, acknowledging that we all make mistakes. No one leaves their house intending to be struck by a car, nor does a driver intend We must reconsider road and intersection design if we want to truly make Concord safe for walkers and bikers. Mothers Out Front Concord calls on you to lead by prioritizing safety for walkers and bicycles by establishing a crash response team to walk the crash site within 48 hours to determine the root causes of a crash and to identify effective short and long-term responses. Rapid temporary measures could be as simple and low cost as orange safety cones for traffic calming. We can look to our town neighbor, Bedford, for inspiration. They put up temporary traffic safety delineator posts after the death of a Concord resident at Reformatory Branch Trail crossing with Route 62, while a permanent fix is explored. Mothers Out Front urges town staff to gather input from residents. We know the dangerous areas in our neighborhood where we don't let our children play. Finally, we ask that you direct Public Works to act decisively, prioritizing safety for walkers and bicycles in all infrastructure projects, instead of relying on uncertain future grant funding. We know that walking and biking are one of the easiest and most effective ways to reduce our impact on the climate while reaping the numerous benefits of a healthy activity. We should make it easy and safe for residents to choose walking or biking for short errands or to take their children to the park. Let's design roads like our kids live here. Their lives depend on it. Thank you for your time on this important issue. We look forward to seeing your response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more from the room, and then I do see there's someone on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Vicki Alani on Commonwealth Avenue. I did not intend to follow Mothers Out Front, but I have kind of a unifying comment, and it comes from, I'll start with actually thanking the Select Board for the 250th celebration, which came with a lot of improvements that we were so thrilled to see. A lot of us in West Concord took the MBTA train for that one stop, and we loved that connection between the two centers, and we'd love to see more ways to maybe permanently keep that connection as an option for especially students and younger folks who want to ride back and forth between the two centers as another way to add transportation to our options. But I will start with what my number 2 option was, or comment was, which was safety focus concerns from people in West Concord. And it follows really the reeling of a lot of the neighbors from a near fatal accident that we saw with a continuing condition at Kenny Dunn Square. And we do now have budget for improvement of the roads, and so we see this as an opportunity to fix what we see as a continuing accident-prone zone. Mm-hmm. If any of you have ever walked from trying to get from Ride Out to Giroux or Ride Out to anywhere along Commonwealth Avenue, it's an extraordinarily dangerous condition. Some of us have been pretty much hit by cars on our bicycles, not fatally, but it's extraordinarily difficult to make that intersection safely the way it's currently designed. There are small fixes that we know that cost money, but before we fix and pave those roads, we think we should repair the condition. Secondly is this push to really unify Concord. We love this idea of one Concord. And we also saw all of the great improvements that happened into Concord Center, and we'd love to have those improvements brought into the businesses in West Concord so that the crosswalks sort of meet the same design requirements that we set for Concord Center, same curb, the same sidewalks, which are handicap accessible now. We don't have all of that on the West Concord side, and so we'd love to see that now becoming a focus to bring both sides up to the same condition. Really benches, like Chris had mentioned earlier, is another one. I know there's a push to get those things, but we are here to help in any way that we can with either of those projects, and there's a big interest in the community to fix the safety and the unification of West Concord. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vicki. We'd like to hear from Gina Stark on Zoom.
Yeah, hi. I'm Gina Stark. I live at 512 Thoreau Street, and I also did not necessarily intend to follow the last 2 comments, but I also wanted to bring some attention to a safety matter that I have been struggling with in getting a proper response from the town. Again, I live on Thoreau Street, and there's no sidewalk And Thoreau Street is very heavy pedestrian area. There are two schools, the high school and Alcott. And I have asked for a solution on how to get my child safely to school. And I have been met with a lot of resistance from various town management people and groups. And I am not sure if it's because they don't know how to fix it or what to do, or if they don't care to. But I'm very concerned that with Article 8, just being on existing infrastructure, that Thoreau Street is going to get overlooked. In addition to the high school kids using it, there are tons of tourists that use it. I see kids coming from Alcott on their bikes going places. Last weekend I saw, or 3 weekends ago rather, I saw a kid and his dad coming down from, I'm assuming Walden Pond, and the kid fell off his bike. Thank God it wasn't during rush hour during a weekday, because he would have been run over. But I just wanted to make sure that the select board is aware it's a huge safety issue, and I don't believe the town knows how to fix it, and I think they could use your guidance.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. We'll stay with Zoom. John Smith. John Smith, can you unmute? There you go.
Hi, I think there's something wrong with the audio feedback. When I'm listening to the meeting, it's broken up a little bit. So when you were speaking, maybe calling on me. Sorry, I couldn't hear it. So anyway, Jonathan Smith, Upland Road in Concord, and I'm just taking this opportunity to speak about traffic calming measures that previous speakers have already brought up. My wife and I have brought up traffic calming, have applied the traffic calming policy 3 different times, and 0 results from the town or the police or anyone. One time they came out and they had a radar fixed to a post so they could gather data, but the radar reader was attached right behind a stop sign. And if you go to the manufacturer, the manufacturer says, do not place this behind a stop sign or on a stop sign. And when we contacted the police about this, they say, oh, we know how to use these machines. It's okay. So the data is flawed. So please do not follow the data that the police have acquired. And also, I just want to know, I want to let you know that I was the one who made the 911 call on the latest accident on Upland. And so I was right there at the scene. And it's pretty appalling when something like that happens right in front of you. And I think the town really needs to grab the bull by the horns here and put in speed humps on either side of the curve on Upland. There's nothing dangerous about that curve. There's something very dangerous about the way people drive. So what we need to do is control the way they drive to make that curve safer. It's as simple as that. I have since sent a letter to the town manager and the select board with a petition signed by numerous residents, not just from Upland, to ask for help from the town to engage other branches of town government, town offices, to do something about traffic calming measures. Please, please, please listen to all of these pleas that you're getting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else in the room?
Katie Shagnon, 81 Upland Road. I'm with following all of these where we had the accident that tragically happened on Upland Road where someone almost lost her life. I have 2 children. I'm neighbors to 3 children. There are 3 children behind me. There are 4 children down the street from me. It's very busy, and we go to Thoreau Elementary School, which my children can walk to, but I am currently afraid to let them cross Upland Road onto Pine Street because nobody stops at that stop sign. I myself have almost been hit multiple times, so letting my almost 5th grader walk by herself, which is her dream, is really hard for me as a parent to let go, especially because I have worked in a trauma hospital and I know what can go wrong.
Sorry.
Yep. So I would just really appreciate anything we can do, clarify signage. People don't know that that's a T intersection. So many people end up in our driveway because our driveway is at that T intersection. We would just really like anything so that people know that what the intersection is, and to let this be safe for the kids so they can walk to the bike path and get downtown. They can walk to school, because right now they can't. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I think we'll close the public comments now. Thank you all for coming. We're hearing you loud and clear. Okay.
All right. So we're ready to move on to the consent agenda.
We're not interested in town government. It's too cold in here.
Yeah, and anyone who's
About to pass
got
out.
a temperature
Yes.
problem,
Yeah,
yeah,
not good.
we have to stay. Thank you.
All right. So do we have any items on the consent agenda that need to be discussed or reviewed before we vote?
What I'd like to do is recognize the representatives from CCHS, Friends of CCHS Swimming and Diving, to receive our appreciation for the gift that's included in the consent agenda. Is there somebody that'd like to speak to this? Or, okay.
Hi, Jeff Lamont. I guess I tell you where I live.
Sure.
51 Dalton Road. Yeah, we feel really, I guess, thankful for all of the effort that's gone into raising the funds to offer this gift to the town. There have been so many folks, Friends of Swim and Dive, represented by Lori Eckler, who is the president of the organization, all the folks at BD and the Concord Rec Department, and all the folks who donated. I think we raised about $93,000 in a matter of a few weeks to support this effort. And I think it really will benefit the BD Center, all of the folks who swim there, not just the CCHS team, but also the otters and all the other folks who use the facility, which is a top-notch facility. And these new swim and dive swim blocks will be a complement to what is already a great facility. So just wanted to say thank you to everyone who supported Jenny, Lee, your teams, and thank you to the select board, and hopefully you will accept this gift from the community.
Yeah, we gratefully will, and we really appreciate the effort that it takes, and we wish we were at the pool right now.
Really.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Do I hear
Second.
second?
I think I'd also like to thank the Concord Free Public Library Corporation for the gift for the professional development of staff.
Yep. That's in the amount of $1,342.
Yep.
And just
Yep,
because we
great.
didn't say it out loud, the Friends are donating $49,245 to cover
8 swimming blocks.
the starting blocks for the
Starting
for the
blocks,
lane pool.
It's great.
Thank you.
And maintenance.
And to get
Yeah,
them
and the
installed,
maintenance,
exactly.
That's great. Good.
Thank
Clarification.
you. All right, any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Any
right.
opposed?
We ready for select board appointments?
Yeah, this is going to be a long list.
Right.
We might want, we're going to start by thanking all those volunteers who've agreed to serve on town boards. And just a reminder to anybody that is on a town board, check the terms of appointment, and be in touch with your chair if you want to be reappointed or help us recruit more volunteers. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to to approve the following select board appointments. First, Paul Bone of 11 Ridgewood Road as an ex officio non-voting representative of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force to the Land Use Working Group for a term to expire at the conclusion of the work outlined in the charge. Second, Rob Almeida of 28 Cumberford Road as a planning board representative to the Land Use Working Group for a term to expire at the conclusion of the work outlined in the charge. Third, Lindsay Wolf of 41 Francis Street as a member, currently an associate member, to the West Concord Advisory Committee with a term to expire May 31st, 2027. And then Scott Akehurst Moore of 86 Holden Wood Road as a full member, current associate member, to the Library Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. Tom Claffin of 113 Hubbard Street as a full member, currently an associate member, to the Library Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. And then reappoint Anita Techley of 260 Virginia Road to the Concord Cultural Council for a second term to expire May 31st, 2028. And then a retroactive reappointment for Bill Marachek, yeah, we say that wrong, of 62 Rollingwood Lane to the Personnel Board for third term to be exempted from APP 10 and permitted under the 2024 bylaw for a term from May 31st, 2024 to expire May 31st, 2027. And then reappoint Catherine Ryan of 109 Stone Root Lane to the Personnel Board for a second term to expire May 31st, 2028. And reappoint Anna Catherine Mock of 199 Oak Hill Circle to the West Concord Junction Cultural District Committee for a first full term to expire May 31st, 2028. And reappoint Carrie LaFleur, Town Manager, to the Concord Municipal Affordable Trust for a second term to expire May 31st, 2027. And reappoint Wendy Ravelli, Select Board, to the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for a second term to expire May 31st, 2026. Reappoint Bianca Taylor of 670 Lowell Road to the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for a second term to expire May 31st, 2026, and reappoint Catherine Berger of 60 Revolutionary Road to the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee for a second term to expire May 31st, 2028. Should I, that's...
Why don't we take a breath there?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So sorry, the retroactive reappointment for Bill, he's been on
He's been on for 2 terms. The personnel bylaw itself contemplates 3 terms for members of that particular board. So clerically, we missed the fact that his second term was ending. So it's retroactive and it's a reappointment for a third term. The personnel board at the moment is 2 people down, so it's a great opportunity for a commercial. We do not have volunteers to serve in that role. And I think you had also Catherine Ryan on here. So we're reappointing 2 of the existing members so that that board can have a quorum and continue to meet.
Okay. So I think we had a second, correct?
Second.
Yes, we did.
Oh, we did?
Well, we do now.
Okay. That's me.
Okay.
All right, we voted.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the appointments that Wendy's already read?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the following select board approval appointments that are town manager identified. First, Shelley Carlin of 60 Walden Terrace to the Climate Action Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. She was nominated on May 19th, and due to an error, we did not appoint at the following meeting. Robert Shatton of 116 Indian Spring Road to the Climate Action Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. Mark Galis of 62 Prescott Road to the Transportation Advisory Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. Lauren Meyer of 36 Mill Run Lane as a full member, current associate member, to the Historic Commission for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. And then reappoint Nancy Nelson of 1695 Lowell Road as an associate member to the Historic Commission for a term to expire May 31st, 2026.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Not doing too bad. Disclosure of non-public, non-elected municipal financial interests. This is Matt Johnson.
Hi, Matt Johnson, 21 Witham Street, member of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, and sorry about this complication. So back when I was on the planning board and the Junction Village site was under discussions, I consulted with the State Ethics Commission, and in Massachusetts, you're presumed to have a conflict of interest if you're within 300 feet of property, and indeed 290 feet from Junction Village.
Lucky you.
But also there was honestly a conflict of interest at that time because our street was intended to be the point of access for that site. So my neighbors, it was just that complicated thing. So what I did at the time was I recused myself from any discussions, and I continued that through being a member of the select board. So now I'm, I joined the Affordable Housing Trust, and I was just imagining I would just continue with the same thing, but then it immediately dawned on me that, of course, now with the MCI Concord property in play and a major affordable housing site, and talked about in an integrated fashion with Junction Village, now I got kind of, what could I do? So I contacted the State Ethics Commission again, and they said, oh, well, you didn't have the option back in the day, but now you've got this thing you can do, this Section 19 conflict of interest disclosure. And so you go to your appointing committee, which is you guys, and you tell them, here's my conflict. And then they decide whether you can deliberate on those matters. So, well, I'm here to say that from my point of view now, especially with MCI now integrating in with Junction Village and access probably not going through Winthrop Street for a variety of reasons, that those conflicts have abated that I ever did have. But then what's more is that it would impede my ability to serve. It wouldn't mean that I'd have to leave the trust, but it is going to be a major topic, and I believe that I can operate fairly, and in fact will strongly promote affordable housing on both sites. So what I'm here to do is to ask your leave to continue to deliberate on matters relating to the MCI Concord site and to in the MCI study area. I will continue to recuse myself on things that are explicitly or uniquely associated with Junction Village. That's what I would propose to do, because I already have in the past. I just don't want to muddy any things that happen with the trust. So whatever you decide.
Well, first, I appreciate your proactivity and your diligence to come forward with this now, especially while it's very much in the planning and visioning stage. Does anyone have any questions, Cameron?
Well, are you an employee?
Technically, yes, even though I'm a volunteer. Those who are appointed to committees, you're an employee.
We're all employees.
I just want,
We're all
I didn't know if
employees,
you just by being on the committee,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are an employee.
being on
You are
a subcommittee, that you are an employee. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the term is special.
Municipal
employee.
employee.
Which
Yeah.
means you're
Yeah, it's sort
special
of like
enough
Elon
to
Musk.
Figure out.
Not exactly.
Don't go there.
He was getting paid $1 more than we are, I think.
I think so, yes.
I have a technical question, more of a geography question. So MCI Concord, as is being discussed right now, it's not within 300 feet of your property, so you're basically connecting Junction Village with MCI Concord?
Well, because everybody else does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that for integrated discussions of the topic, I think it's important to be explicit about that. So,
And there is an active discussion trying to integrate the requirements around Junction Village
That's
within MCI as well.
That's
So I
right.
think it's a good idea.
Right,
to
the
have-
MCI Advisory Board actually, in the consulting engagement that we had done, actually explicitly asked that the Junction Village property be included in the planning and envisioning and potential rezoning. Even though we recognize that it is a separate parcel, it has some deed restrictions that would have to be either honored or modified. But because they are directly abutting each other, and that report is due any minute now, so we'll start to look at that. But Matt's absolutely right.
I think that's it. I don't want to really take any more of your time. So.
Any further questions?
No. Do we need to make a motion recognizing that we accept?
We
Yeah,
do.
okay,
Right.
so
It's-
this says tentative, but I'll read it as written here. So let me just make a motion that as appointing officials, as required by GL, Section, Chapter 268A, 19A, the Select Board has reviewed this matter and the financial interest identified above by Mr. Johnson of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. The Select Board determined that the financial interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services with which the municipality may expect from the employee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I'll make the comment additionally that in looking at this particular request, it occurred to me that if it doesn't directly apply, certainly the principle applies that the planning around MCI Concord affects the broader community as a whole. It affects virtually everybody. And so in my mind at least, it falls under the same principle that we apply when we consider setting the municipal tax rate, for example.
Or zoning.
It affects everyone, or what?
Zoning.
Or zoning, yeah. So from that perspective, and at the end of the day, much of what the town's interests are likely to be put forward for MCI are going to be in a zoning matter. So I'm quite comfortable with this, but I also, as I said before, appreciate your diligence and bringing this up now so that it could be discussed and we could consider it before we have another decision in front of us. Any other comments?
No.
All right, hearing none, are we ready for a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay,
Land use.
yes. So we have one more member of the land use working group to nominate. We have had, well, when last we met, those many weeks ago, we had 3 candidates. Since then, a fourth person has come forward as well. And I know that information was circulated. Has everyone had an opportunity to consider all 4 candidates to the extent?
Yes.
You have
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
All right. And before we, so are we ready to move to a nomination? And do we want to have a discussion about the candidates, or do we have a particular nominee in mind?
Well,
I guess I'd like to just comment, we talked about some of these candidates previously.
Yes.
And the new candidate, Judith Long, I did speak with, I think is actually an excellent candidate. She's got 10 years of urban planning, some experience in historic preservation, interesting background, real estate financing. And what's particularly important to me is that part of her job today is working with municipal staff on how to evaluate projects that
Mhm.
they're looking at.
Right.
So I found her qualifications very unique and well aligned with the needs that we have on this committee.
Yeah, I do think of Judith as the dark horse candidate whose credentials I think are what we're looking for, more closely match what we're looking for. My only reservation was having the time and the experience as far as running a committee and being a chair, and we had discussed having the at-large member be the chair because the at-large member is the only member that doesn't come with a particular perspective. So I would ask this board to maybe at our next meeting consider a co-chair arrangement with the land use working group and hopefully nominate co-chair arrangement, but we can talk about that next. I just want to bring that up now.
I didn't recall having the at-large person being the chair. Maybe I'm.
We had talked about it in passing, but we hadn't really decided that.
Okay.
Paul?
I was going to say, my discussions with Judith, I agree, is very well qualified. If that group needed an outside consultant with expertise on planning, she would have the resume. So I think by adding her, we would, it's a benefit of getting that expertise. I spoke to her about her lack of experience in working on town committees.
Right.
But there's enough experience in working on town committees on that group. I also spoke with her about, and we can discuss this later, about the co-chair. She seemed not to be terribly interested in that. I'm not sure that's a necessity in evaluating her nomination. But
Yep, good
once again, we have some strong candidates here, but I think she brings some unique abilities and talents. So I would support her.
Yeah, I would strongly support Judith. Won't repeat. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, PhD in urban planning from Harvard's pretty good for doing a urban planning project. So I think that's pretty cool, right? It's amazing. And I think I would sort of more defer to the committee as to like the chair.
Okay.
I just, let them kind of take it up, and haven't spoke to any of them as to whether or not they would want to chair or not chair. So, so I think that, we
I
can
think
take
What
that
do you
up.
think?
There's something to be said for allowing committees to at least consider organizing themselves. And I know it is hard.
It's hard, and we're kind of trying to get.
Yeah, we want to get going.
I guess I would propose nominating and then having the committee then take a vote and discuss and take a vote. So they still have the option of nominating someone else, but to kick it off.
Okay. So, just to be clear, because we're at the stage of nominating, we would
Yeah.
actually do the appointment at our next meeting.
That's right.
My understanding is that this board is actually considering having a meeting
We have a meeting scheduled for July 8th.
July 8th. So
We do.
we can certainly encourage her to participate if we nominate her, but
Yep.
Yep.
or at least observe.
Yes.
Okay. So do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we nominate Judith Long to be the at-large representative of the newly forming land use working group.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Great. A little more?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this ought to cool you off. We're going to hear.
The public hearing?
Yeah, well, first, let's see. Yeah, we're going to be hearing about the next item on the agenda, I believe, is the Comcast agreement. And I think we're hearing from
Jason?
Jason.
Good.
So I'm going to encourage Jason, there he is. He snuck in. Sorry.
You're so quiet, Jason.
Where it's cooler. Okay, and are we close to back on time? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we're going to try to be succinct about this if we can, Jason. And, I think that the primary interest yes, please, from this meeting is going to be the changes, the effective date, and particularly the financial impact. So, thank you.
So I've also like to recognize that we have Sue Buskey, who is our primary consultant on this process. She's on and available to take any questions as well.
Great.
There's a presentation in your packet. I don't think there's any need to go through it, but I just wanted to say that this is the culmination of a few years of work by a lot of different people who are involved in this process.
Excuse me, do we have to open a public hearing?
It's a great point. Yes.
Okay,
No.
so I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
This is on the contract, though.
Comcast franchise
I
agreement?
don't know, it says public
Okay,
hearing.
all right. So, all right. Can I have a motion? Sorry, Jason. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye? Great.
Jason
Now-
Bolger, Light Plant Director and Acting CIO. So first, I just want to say that this process is the culmination of a few years of work on the behalf or by many, many staff and committee members. First, it started with the PEG Access Advisory Committee, who hired a consultant, Sue Buskey, and her group, who's online. to help the town negotiate this contract with Comcast. This is a 10-year license agreement, and it gives Comcast the access to the right-of-way to provide their cable services to residents and businesses in the town. They also make payments to the town, which is then used for media services like what's covering the meeting here today at Minuteman Media, which is the town department. So the process that we went through was conducting a needs assessment to see what the community wanted out of an agreement with Comcast. And, you know, I'll summarize it, but there were information forums that were held in multiple town buildings. There was a survey that was published for a few months, and the respondents came back and gave us a list of things that they wanted. And that was more high-quality content as an HD quality picture. They wanted to make sure that they had always had enough channels to have access to the content that they wanted to watch. They wanted an electronic program guide that they could see the content, that what they were watching. And, you know, they wanted to make sure the customer service was kept and maintained at a high level. So we then did an inventory of all of Minuteman Media's equipment and identified their needs. And out of that came a recommendation for the basis for negotiation with Comcast. There was a negotiating committee that consisted of a select board member, Terry Ackerman, myself, and Sue Buskey. We kept council in the loop and also worked with the town manager at several instances to discuss the contract negotiations. And it was basically a 1.5 year long process of going back and forth with 2 representatives from Comcast who were negotiating in good faith and trying to come to terms with the things that we were advocating for, which was the feedback that we got from the community. So as Mr. Howell recommended, is to stick to kind of the summary and the changes and what the effective date is. So the effective date of the contract before you is August 1st of this year, and it will be a 10-year agreement. The primary changes are the number of channels, which go from 3 SD channels, that's low quality, to 4 high definition channels. It'll be the first studio in the state to have all HD channels. Also, our quarterly payments, which were 4.8% of gross profits, have risen to 5% of gross annual revenue. Our capital payments went from $176,000 over the last 10-year agreement to $615,000 over the next 10-year agreement. And Comcast is also pledging to help customers who wish to migrate to HD programming to provide them additional support in doing so and sending out a technician for free to help them do that. Typically, Comcast mails you equipment today and asks you to do it yourself, but we recognize that a lot of residents may not feel comfortable doing that, and so they agreed to help in that way. And they've also agreed to many different items inside letters that are not in the agreement that kind of go along with the agreement. And some of that includes discounts for senior citizens and several other attempts to make good on the electronic programming promise if it becomes available. It's limited right now by the technical abilities of Comcast and their head ends. But if it becomes available, then we will have access to it. I wanted to mention that the PEG Access Advisory Committee voted unanimously to recommend this agreement. It's been vetted by a special counsel that we hired who really just focuses on these agreements. Sue Buskey, who helped Carlisle negotiate their agreement, who's working with Worcester on a current agreement, feels like this is a very good deal for Concord. And Terry Ackerman also, was in support of it as well. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that.
Just one question. There was, you mentioned the 4 high definition channels. Are those still shared with Carlisle or are they separate? So it's 4 across the 2.
That was one of our negotiating strategies, was to say that if we have 3 channels and Carlisle has 3 channels and they're the same 3 channels, then we really don't have 3 channels. So by doing this, we could identify 1 channel as more primary Carlisle and reserve 3 for the town of Concord, or we could split them depending on a lot of different things. So it just gives us more access and latitude to program.
How many households in Concord use Comcast?
That's a great question. It's dropping. I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it's about 3,500, I would say.
About 50% of the households? Okay.
And that's just cable. Remember, we're just talking about cable TV with this because it was the Cable Act that established it. So there may be others who have Comcast Internet. We get a
Right.
license fee based on the number of cable subscribers.
Right, so what you just said, the 3,500 is cable subscribers.
Only, yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
And I've got one more question. So the big increase in the capital payments, that's nice. Is that going to be used for equipment for MMN?
Yes. And so upgrades for equipment like cameras in this room. Right now, we only have the capability to go live from either this room or that room, but not both rooms.
Okay.
And there's always this
Yes,
little
we've
dance we
rented-
do. So we'll be doing things like upgrading the equipment to allow for simultaneous or seamless transitions of meetings from one room to another.
Great, very good.
Is there anything that we asked for that they didn't give us? What were their sort of negotiating points? I'm just
Well,
curious.
I mean, the electronic programming guide was such a high demand item from the residents here in Concord that we really fought for that for a long time. And we had to understand the technical limitations of why that couldn't happen right now. But we talked to a lot of different people, both in Massachusetts and outside of Massachusetts, to understand how it worked. And I will say, even if it's allowed, we do have to pay quite a bit of money to make that happen. I think that down the road, there may be other solutions that would allow for something like an electronic programming guide that may not be the traditional model we've used so far. But other than that, I think that one thing maybe is that they would prefer shorter contracts because there's a lot of uncertainty. We did get a 10-year agreement again, which we're happy about. And then also, they like to tie things to number of subscribers or gross revenue rather than flat amounts. And you'll see that the capital payments are both, it's a combination. It's a flat amount plus a percentage of their gross revenue. So that guarantees an amount of capital payment. And then the other portion is flexible based on the number of subscribers. And the figure I quoted you is our estimate based on a continued trend of what we've been seeing. So it's not assuming we stay the same because we know that likely the number will decrease over time.
Right, great, thanks.
Additional question. So I know that a considerable amount of the money that we receive from Comcast goes directly into the MMN budget. So how are you feeling about this agreement in terms of the long-term stability of that funding source for that budget?
I feel very good. I mean, I think that the influx of capital comes at a really good time. The fund balance for MMN is high. The auditors actually recommended kind of drawing that down. And for this current fiscal year's budget and next year's budget, there's a lot of deferred maintenance and things that we were waiting until we had certainty on this. So now that we know where the capital is, I think that we're going to be good for the life of this agreement.
Is there any risk that, given that we have more capital and we'll have more equipment, that eventually we would need an increased headcount to actually operate some of that
I
equipment?
don't think so. The staff and Julie Manugian, who's the manager at Minuteman Media, have done a great job at trying to get more people engaged in this from the public and from the schools. So we're trying to use those resources rather than tap into existing headcount. But I think that right now, there's no indication that any additional capital would require more.
Okay.
For those people in the community that are not traditional cable subscribers, are the 4 channels also live streamed in a way that, and will they be live streamed in HD?
Yes, and so actually one of the exciting things that has just happened is that there's a new broadcast server at Minuteman Media, and we actually bought it hoping that we would get more than 3 HD channels because it supports up to 8 channels total. But in addition to that, any events can be live streamed, and we're also going to be going live with some apps that you can watch TV on, like Roku, for example, or Apple TV, where there'll be an integrated app just for Minuteman Media because we recognize so many people are either going to YouTube or trying to look at their content offline because they have cut the cord.
Great. We can take questions from the public on the Comcast licensing agreement. Either approach the microphone or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Okay. Seems like you guys have done an amazing job. Oh, was there? Okay, Vince.
Since there are no other public questions, I'm actually the chair of the PEG Access Advisory
Yeah,
Committee.
introduce yourself while you're in front of the microphone for those people that are online.
Okay. Yes, there's an issue with microphone. Anyway, I'd like to commend to the select board and the town manager the excellent job that Jason and Sue Buskey have done on this contract. We voted for it unanimously in the PEG Access Board. It has everything that we had asked about and more, actually. So congratulations. And in the case of the Comcast representative, he was very important during the pandemic in keeping the bits flowing, because it was the only way really that people could stay in contact with the outside world. But going forward, we don't think that Comcast will never be less than a co-equal internet service provider in the town. So,
Thank you, Vince.
Thank you all.
Okay. Hearing none, can I have a motion?
To close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And do we have a motion?
Sure. Make a motion to approve the Comcast franchise agreement as included in the select board meeting packet.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much, Jason.
Good
And
job.
we're about to
Good
hear
job.
from Jason again.
I know.
Yeah,
I won't go anywhere.
So,
Jason's back.
many of you will have noticed that there are a couple of grant of location applications on our agenda coming up for small cell installations on Sudbury Road. So I took the opportunity to ask Jason, as our lead technologist for the town, to give us a brief discussion and background on the cellular technologies, what macro cells are, what distributed antenna systems are, and what small cells are, so that we can differentiate that. Cell phone coverage has been a hot topic, let's say, in the town of Concord for some time, and this is one of the potential solutions. So thank you, Jason.
Happy to do it. So as you mentioned, there are kind of three different types of technologies that can help address cell phone coverage in a territory. The first is the macro tower or macro facility. This is a large scale intended to be broadcast very far. Again, the farther you are away from a source, generally the slower that is going to be for your bandwidth and speed. So what carriers realized was that maybe in very dense areas where people needed to do more than just make phone calls, that they could augment that with something much closer and much faster. And that is where you get small cell. So a small cell is just a smaller antenna, usually closer to the ground than a tower, somewhere between 20, say, and 50 feet high. And it can be building mounted, it can be pole mounted. And these are lower powered versions of cell towers intending to augment macro coverage. One of the things that we learned early on by talking to carriers is that their base level standard is macro coverage because they want people to make phone calls. When people's phone calls are dropped, they cancel their service. So they want a base level of macro coverage to make those critical phone calls. And then wherever there are population centers, they want sort of this faster speed, ability to stream data at much faster speeds. And so small cell does that. Now, small cell can also fill in gaps where it isn't practical to have a tower. There may be a building or a large structure that's blocking a large tower. And so carriers will sometimes use small cell to augment that as well. When Mark referred to a distributed antenna system or DAS, that is basically a way to either connect a series of small cell antennas or rebroadcast and repower basically ambient antennas. And an example is at the CCHS campus, they actually use a distributed antenna system to try to take the ambient coverage and repower that into the building so people have a little bit of coverage. It does require, though, a certain baseline ambient coverage for that to actually work. Other municipalities like Wellesley have created their own distributed antenna systems where they will create a kind of a cluster of these small cell devices and then lease them out to carriers to say, hey, we have all these different antennas. Would you guys like to join on this different system and lease some of our spectrum or some of our bandwidth to provide your service to customers? This board did approve a small cell policy back in 2022, and that came after the FCC basically issued regulations saying that municipalities had a certain amount of time to follow their guidance as to setting a shot clock where a town would have to respond within a certain 30, 60, 90-day period, depending on the application, and all the other rules that were laid out in that declaratory order in 2018. So the town did do that in 2022. And this is actually the first application we've had under that policy.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Paul?
Yeah, given the challenges we're having in siting macro antennas, would small cells be the solution in town centers for various carriers?
Great question. So the town of Concord has a bylaw that says we are to underground our electric utilities and our telecommunications utilities. And so in large portions of the town, up to 50% of it, all of those poles have been removed and those infrastructures have been put underground. And that makes it a challenge when looking for a solution in the right of way. You have either streetlights or you have poles. When the decorative streetlights were bought, say in the downtown area, they weren't bought with the intention of attaching anything to them. There was never any infrastructure like additional power or fiber communication lines that were brought to those. So it makes it a challenge with our current environment. There are above ground areas of town, and those may be suitable for small cell. I think that our problem to date has not been our lack of interest in placing small cell, but the carrier's lack of interest in using it as a solution, because it really is driven by the carriers and their analytics of dropped calls, the number of customers they have in a given area, the customer experience that they calculate based on a lot of different metrics. So when something hits a threshold, then they look for a solution, and small cell can be one of those, and AT&T is proposing we use that in a small area downtown.
So this is potential solution for AT&T subscribers,
Exactly.
but not for other carriers.
This application would only serve AT&T customers.
So, for example, Verizon would have to use their poles for their own small cell.
Right. Fortunately, the town did sign a wireless lease to build a monopole at the landfill, and hopefully we get lots of carriers interested in that, and that may help in a lot of different areas. But this solution is available to any carrier who's interested. I think that what we heard from the carriers was that they really prefer to have a baseline level of coverage before they explore small cell. We flat out asked Verizon and T-Mobile if we had a DAS, would they sign on? And it's just not their priority right now.
But the landfill tower will not provide coverage in central Concord by itself.
That's our RF analysis shows that it will not blanket the downtown area.
So you're either going to need a cell tower in Concord or a small cell
Right.
system to move the signal, amplify the signal. Are those equally viable options in the future, beyond this application?
Right. So, I mean, T-Mobile has a facility in a church, in the downtown area. Verizon is exploring, looking for a site to put one in the downtown area as well. AT&T has something on the wastewater treatment facility. I think a lot of the carriers do. And then at Emerson Hospital, there is kind of this gap area near the Rooster Corridor by the high school or the landfill, and then in the downtown. So I think, again, from a site perspective, Verizon feels like they have enough customers that they really need a macro site. And we lack the infrastructure to put enough small cells that would really blanket the town. You have to also consider that the handoff between small cells doesn't provide as good of a customer experience as a macro site when you're talking about a phone call. When you have a phone call and you're roaming as you drive from streetlight to streetlight and you may have handoff to handoff, it may work pretty well. It won't work as well as a macro site. So for people who are frustrated by the cell service, having 4 small cells from Verizon may not completely alleviate that frustration.
So just the last question on this. So this potentially will solve the central Concord coverage for AT&T subscribers.
And T-Mobile, who may
and T-Mobile. So it leaves, the remaining cell coverage is largely a Verizon issue, not a,
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to be clear, a small cell's coverage area is usually about a quarter mile around wherever it's located, versus a macro cell can be a mile or better.
Sure.
And since that's squared, it's a substantially larger area, like 16 times as large when you put in a macro cell. And so if you think about all the handoffs that are involved, if you you're coming towards a pole, basically you have half a mile, which even, hopefully everybody's not exceeding 30 miles an hour, but that's basically less than 1 minute of your call can be covered by any given small cell if you're moving along in a car, for example.
So just, I think I've got it, but just to be clear, I think for myself and maybe for others that are listening, the landfill is a macro tower. The things that we've considered at like Emerson Umbrella and Kai's Road would also have been macro towers,
Correct.
right? So this is a very different, much smaller thing that, you know, that hasn't been in consideration in our previous RFPs.
This is a carrier request.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
this isn't the town asking.
Okay. So we can get into specifics about the application, but I wanted to just have a little bit of a level set.
Yep.
So that we had the vocabulary at our fingertips. So with that, I think we might be ready to open the public hearing for the application of small cell installations by AT&T at pole 1 and pole 143, I believe.
So move to open the public hearing.
Yeah.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. I'm an aye as well. And
You're the first customer.
okay. Mr. Parr. Sure. Oh. Yeah.
Didn't want to pass out there.
It's a good idea.
Hold on.
Are we at the appointed time?
Yes, welcome. I think 7:05 was the appointed time, I believe, so we're running about 5 minutes late, but that's okay.
Good evening. My name is Edward Parry. It's P-A-R-E. I'm attorney at Brown Rudnick, One Financial Center in Boston. I'm here representing New Singular Wireless, PCS LLC, which operates as AT&T. Sitting to my right is Kevin Brewer, who's the radio frequency engineer from AT&T. So we'll be able to answer all of your coverage questions that as they relate to the AT&T network, as Jason so.
Hi, I just want to say that we're having a hard time hearing from that microphone. When you turn your head, we lose it. And so if you could, can we see if this works better? That'd be grand. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Better? Testing 1, 2.
Diane, have that sound.
Hello? Can you hear?
Yeah, it's better now. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, great.
So again, Ed Parry representing AT&T, Kevin Brewer, B-R-E-U-E-R from AT&T. He's AT&T's radio frequency engineer. It's kind of doing a mic drop there, I thought, for a second. So yeah, this is a somewhat newer type of technology that AT&T is proposing. The FCC did issue regulations and an order with respect to these small cell facilities. So we utilize the public right-of-way, which is why we go after utility poles, light poles, furniture, as we call it, within the public right-of-way. The town of Concord obviously enacted regulations back in 2022, so I guess we get to be the guinea pigs for the regulations. So I think Jason did a nice job handling the difference between a macro site and a small cell. I will say that a small cell is kind of a small version of a macro site. The chair noted that the coverage, depending on terrain, depending on buildings, depending on interruption signal, generally we call it out at about a quarter-mile radius from the site itself. So this evening we have two sites. I'll kind of give what we're doing to both poles because they're basically the same. So we install a 2-foot antenna, it's 24 inches, up on the top of the pole. In this instance, we'll replace both poles. There's an equipment cabinet that goes on the side of the pole. The radios and the switching gear are located within that equipment cabinet. There is a meter, electric meter, so that the light plant can appropriately charge AT&T for service, and there's also a shut-off switch. So we've worked with the light plant, I'm going to say for about a year to a year and a half. Both of these sites were worked out cooperatively with the light plant. This is the one. This is the proposed node. We call them nodes. Near 1 Sudbury. So as you see, the antenna's up at the top. As I said, 24 inches. The equipment cabinet is down on the side. It's about 11.5 feet above ground level. Just below that's the electric meter and the shutoff. You can't quite see it, but it is highlighted with a blue arrow there. Again, the pole selection was done in cooperation with the light plant. There is some undergrounding that the town is involved in, so we can't bring fiber and electricity. Each of these small cell facilities, just like a macro site, requires power to operate and some sort of communications connection. We use fiber these days, so we need both sources. With these 2 poles that we're proposing, we can bring overhead fiber and overhead electricity to power the site. So from our perspective, we're utilizing an existing infrastructure in the public right-of-way, albeit a pole replacement. It'll be a wooden pole. It's not going to be a big monopole with, a bunch of antennas and a bunch of equipment hanging off it. So they'll both be similar. This one is, not directly in front of the residents. We understand we are in a residential zoning district. If we could pan down, maybe. This is the location at 143. So this one is in a very commercial area right in front of the mobile station. Again, there'll be a pole replacement. Again, typical installation for AT&T small cell, 2-foot canister antenna at the top, equipment cabinet on the side and here you can see the shutoff switch just below the equipment cabinet and the electric meter just below that. There are 2 grounding rods that are placed next to the pole. Once the pole is replaced, it'll comply with all requirements of the FCC, all requirements of your regulations, building code, electrical code, etc. Both of the sites are low power, so we're at about 5.9% of the FCC maximum. So we're well in compliance with all applicable requirements. This will provide coverage in these areas. Again, it's somewhat limited because of the low power and the use of only 1 antenna. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. They're pretty straightforward. I know that I've probably done at least 500 of these throughout the Commonwealth over the last 5 or 6 years, just for AT&T. I did get some calls from customers or residents in town about what these will service. They don't service the competitors, only AT&T, as was discussed previously. So is it possible that our competitors may come in? They very well may. We don't know where each of the carriers' coverage is coming from. We all compete, obviously, for customers. In this instance, this is a nice way to provide additional coverage and capacity, and with anything specific regarding that, Kevin is here to help with the technology and the coverage we'll be providing. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's something you'd like to delve into a little bit more deeply, I'd be happy to do so.
Are these close enough to each other to provide a direct handoff from one to the other?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the board?
I guess the one question I had, how tall is the telephone pole? I know that we had to replace the poles because they have to be high enough. How high are those poles?
They're usually about, based on my experience, the pole's usually about 45 feet, and then they have to bury part of it, so they bury 5 or 6 feet. Again, I'm just speaking in generalities, so typically you get about a 40-foot. In this instance, I can give you the exact if I take my glasses out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's high enough to optimize your cell coverage. I mean, that's the point, right? So it has to be a certain height.
While he's looking that up, those of us that have really long memories about the undergrounding in CMLP will remember that those poles used to be taller when they had electric service on them, and then after the electric service was underground and removed, they were shortened because they were only having telecommunications on them anymore.
So for the one on 1 Sudbury Road, the existing pole is 25 feet 4 inches above ground level. Once the pole is replaced, it'll be 29 feet 6 inches above ground level. So it's 4 feet 2 inches if I did my math right. And the other's a bit shorter. Let me see. The other pole is only at 20 feet 7 inches. The existing, this is the one outside the mobile, right in front of the mobile station. The replacement would be 34 feet, which is kind of our sweet spot, somewhere between 30, 35 and 40, Kevin, you'd say?
Usually it's just about 35 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
Were there, like, did we evaluate a bunch, like, are there a bunch of these poles in town that we, like, evaluated? If a competitor did want to come in, I'm asking a little bit of a tangential question to your application. But if somebody else wanted to come in, is it like, hey, there's an inventory of like 30 other locations? Maybe Jason knows, I don't know. But I'm just curious, like, how we got to these 2 spots and, you know, versus the whole available inventory.
I can tell you that generally the poles that are left are poles that have communications that have not yet been undergrounded, or they serve some other purpose, like they have a light on them, like the one at Sudbury that's illuminating the intersection and the library, and then others are guy poles that maybe are holding up other infrastructure that can't be undergrounded. There are not a lot in the downtown area, but he's right in that they worked with CMLP operational crews to look at poles that had the requirements and were also in their area where they needed coverage. But there are others, but just not a lot.
Yeah, okay. So someone else could come. I mean, there are other possibilities down the road for others. Okay.
Could another carrier come in and use this pole?
No.
Or is this now these poles reserved exclusively for AT&T?
You know, I mean, my response to that would be that typically the utility company doesn't allow for co-location. It's one carrier, one set of equipment on a pole. I think you'd probably have to go to metal poles if that were the case, just for structural purposes. But we're both going to be trying to get to the top of the pole, maximize, you know, coverage, height, without extending something like a macro site. I will say I think this was our 3rd that we talked to the power plant about. We had one site on Route 62, another further down on Sudbury. Both were rejected. So we not only have to have something that works for us, we have to have a willing licensor or landlord, if you will. So we rent space, and fortunately, I guess, for the light plant, we get to pay for the pole replacement on their behalf. So that, yeah. So that's what we, this is how the site selection works.
With these 2 placements are, what's the coverage in downtown Concord? Where, are there other dead zones?
Could we, can you pop up our radio coverage maps by chance?
Those weren't in the package.
Oh, they should.
So
Yeah, they
there,
were.
I might,
Pictures?
it'd take me a few minutes to log in and.
there was a SharePoint folder that had some.
The coverage?
Yeah, so we were
They,
kind
they,
of selected.
they should look like multicolor, rainbow kind of.
Yeah, we've seen some in the past. Not this specific
You should
one,
have,
but
you
yeah,
should have
just-
them.
Cell phone coverage is a big topic, so we've had a lot of discussions
I-
on cell. We've seen a lot of maps. Yeah.
While we try to look
follow
up
along.
that- While we try and find that, are there any other questions? Are there any questions online? We can take a question or comment from the public while we find the coverage map. In the back, please come to the microphone. Just begin with your name and
Good evening, everyone. Liam Pasquin, 1 Sudbury Road. This is my wife, Sun Wong. Thank you to the Select Board for considering this issue and being here tonight. It's very hot. Just a few comments. We did submit some written comments previously, and I just want to make sure that those are part of the record. Thank you so much. So just to be clear, my name is Liam. My wife, Sue, and I live at 1 Sudbury Road. The applicant here seeks to install node 1 of the facility, a stone's throw from our front porch, which we have certainly concerns with. We have submitted comments on this matter, and we stand by them here. We firmly do not believe that the application is consistent with the town's policy on small cell wireless facilities, and respectfully submit that this select board not approve the application for that reason. The placement of node 1 of the project in the ROW in front of 1 Sudbury Road is clearly a least preferred location, as described in the plain language of the policy. At the heart of the town's historic district, a stone's throw from residential homes, and nearby a school where children, retirees, and community members are present every day. On that basis alone, this application is materially flawed. The town worked very hard to draft and implement its policy on small cell wireless facilities, and I think we should follow it here. Yet, despite such a location, including, and I'm referring to Node 1 here, the application includes no alternatives analysis that we can see, and the applicant engaged in no stakeholder engagement whatsoever, even with the abutters who may be most impacted by the new installation. We are very troubled by these omissions and submit that the Select Board should be too. If, in light of these failings, the Select Board still wishes to consider the application for approval, we respectfully submit that the Select Board impose a common sense solution here, by which the applicant acknowledges stakeholder concerns and acts upon them in the near future, including by moving the facility to a location that is a more preferred site. And if I may, just a couple quick comments on what I've heard previously. I believe now this is the first small cell wireless application that the board has received and considered. I believe counsel for AT&T referred to his client as the guinea pig. I think that there is much reason for the Select Board to move cautiously and not make a decision here that is rash or without deep concern and deep consideration. Thank you so much.
Are there any other comments?
Boy, that was too quick. Thank you, Chair Howell and members of the board. I'm Don Kupka, 39 Devon Street in Concord. I'm living in the area to be served by these two antennas, and I would say in the last year I've learned a lot more about this stuff than I ever thought I wanted to. But what I've learned, and I'd ask anyone here who knows more than me to correct me on this, is that a small cell antenna like this, serving a 1/16th the area of a large cell antenna, is emitting a tiny fraction of the energy of a large cell antenna. And I would say it's much less than 1/16th of it. And in this case, it's an LTE antenna. So it's not really for video. It's not a high power 4G or 5G. This is really for voice communication. So I think in terms of how we can get improved cell coverage in Concord Center, this is probably, maybe, whether this pole or a different pole, it's probably the sweet spot of minimal impact on the community for the maximal benefit in terms of being able to place a phone call. My question for AT&T, first I should say I'm a Verizon customer, and I'll probably switch to AT&T if this goes in, because it would be great to have this coverage. There are some poles that are on Main Street that are behind the buildings, say behind Sally Ann's Bakery, and there's another behind the Christian Science reading room. These are not really visible from the public way, and I'm wondering if you had looked at putting an antenna on one of those locations, or would consider doing so. Thank you.
I can either take another comment, or if you'd like to respond to any of what you've heard, Mr. Pari.
Yep, we can take a couple more comments. I'm getting close. I'll have them emailed
Okay.
over.
Great.
Good evening. John Graham, 99 Main Street. I'm an immediate abutter of Sue Ann and Liam's. Our property is right next to theirs. And I read the submission that Liam and Sue Ann submitted, and I more or less support all the comments that they've made. I also read the policy, and one thing I want to say is, this proposal sort of took, I think, all of us completely by surprise. That I didn't know that this was being considered until, just a couple of weeks ago when we got the notice of this public hearing. And my interpretation of, having read the policy about the least preferred siting, it doesn't say anything about health and safety explicitly, but need, the avoidance of residential areas and schools and the like, I am taking it does have some health and safety concerns built into it. I don't really know what the science says on, citing locations of these kinds of facilities, but I just want to go on the record of saying that my home office, where I sit for 10 or 12 hours a day, I took a tape measure out last night and measured. It's 200 feet from the pole. And we have three small grandchildren who frequently visit, and we have 2 more that we're expecting. So I just want to put that on the record and would support the comments of Liam and Sue Ann.
Thank you. I'll take a comment from online. Tracy Morano.
Hi there, Tracy Morano, 39 Partridge Lane, Chair of the Regional School Committee. I just had a couple of questions about coverage for Alcott and CCHS, if either one of these poles would provide any coverage to those areas.
No.
The high school definitely not. I'm sorry. The high school, it won't provide coverage from there. But there is a proposed tower that's somewhere near Walden Pond that we can cover from there. In the other school,
Alcott.
Alcott on Laurel Street.
It's on the other side of
The
Emerson.
other side of Emerson Field. So it's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah,
more
so
than a quarter mile.
these 2 sites pretty much will cover the downtown area and up to the train station.
Yeah.
So that's about the limits that it's really going to have.
And just one last question, was there any consideration of putting a pole closer to Alcott or to the high school?
So, yes, the high school, we're actually talking about whether or not the pole itself would provide enough, the proposed monopole, Walden Pond, if that would provide enough coverage there. So we come up with lots of plans, and very few get funded, but we do have plans to cover larger areas. It's just takes a lot of time to get them through the funding channel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment in the front?
Rosa Hallowell, 19 Sudbury Road, on the other side of Sue Ann and Liam. 3 questions. The first is, we had hours of debate over the large towers at town meeting, and the small project wasn't mentioned, despite the fact that the application went in April. So just curious as to why not. Second question, a lot of that debate was about health. There wasn't a single entity in Concord that could opine or cite a study as to whether or not such cell towers were indeed safe or weren't. The FCC doesn't opine on that either, though they have regulations, but they don't cite any specific studies, and I'm wondering whether or not the town or AT&T has any reliable academic studies regarding small cell safety. Third question, these poles, I believe, are slated soon to be undergrounded as well. They are one of the primary historic areas in town. Everything that I do, or whether I sneeze, is regulated by historic district. And it's striking to me that we would be adding technology to poles that eventually will be going underground, that currently have lots of complications because of trees, et cetera. So that's the third question, is when is that undergrounding happening? And then sort of a fourth question, if this has been being considered for so many months, my house is within the 80-foot setback. I'm nearly on Sudbury, so even though it's in front of Sue Ann and Liam's, I'm closer to the pole. Just wondering why nobody knocked on my door.
Did you receive the letter?
2 weeks ago,
2 weeks
and
ago.
this was filed in April.
Okay, just making sure. Jason, do you want to talk to the process of where we stand in the undergrounding of, or removal of those poles?
I can tell you that a lot of times when we have, as you alluded to earlier, when we underground the electric utility, the communications from Verizon and Comcast lag behind sometimes years or decades for them moving that. Sometimes it's just a matter of them doing the work to pull it underground, or other times it would require significant investments that they have been hesitant to make. But in the case of these two poles, there are other reasons why they exist as overhead poles. In the case of the Sudbury Road one, there's a light fixture on that, and then on the other one, I believe it's connected to a guy wire, or to a guy pole rather, and is serving some other purpose. But it's true that these poles may be slated for undergrounding once all other utilities have left them, and in that case, the applicant would need to, remove their infrastructure.
And Mr. Pari referred to a new fiber service that was supporting the installation of these nodes. Do we know who is actually installing that fiber? Because I thought that the underground bylaw restricted the existing providers from installing new services.
I don't know who they plan to use for fiber.
Whoever the local provider would be, or if AT&T has a preferred provider, it would be someone that's operating in town.
Okay.
So let me talk about the FCC, and I've asked Kevin to see if he can dig up the plots quickly. So we're required to comply with the FCC standards. That's the only standard we're required to comply with. As I said, the pole at 1 Sudbury is about 5.9% of the maximum. The pole at 143 is 5.7 at 1 Sudbury. And 4.2 at the 143 Sudbury. So we don't reach out to the neighborhood. This is the process that the town has selected. You put forth regulations. We painstakingly went through those regulations, responded to each of the requirements. This is the public forum for these small cell facilities. So, I do get some emails, I get some messages that we're somehow hiding something. This is the process. This is the first time members of the public and abutters are seeing this coming forward. We may have filed in April, but I'm not quite sure the town was ready to accept an application and to process it, so that was the delay. Once the public hearing was set, abutters were advised of the meeting. The town followed the proper protocols with respect to notice. As a matter of fact, I had a discussion with the staff about making sure we got proper notice out. So clearly people got notice they're here. So you notify abutters. I mean, we don't dictate who lives how far from the facility. I did a Google Earth check to see how far the residence was when I heard there was an issue with it. It's approximately 80 feet from the small cell facility. We put these within 12 or 15 feet of a residence. So in our mind, this is a low-impact facility. Likewise, 80 feet is a lot of distance for a small cell facility because of the low power. Now, I do have, I hope, Don Hayes on Zoom.
I am here, sir.
Okay. So as part of our filing, you did receive an emissions report that Mr. Hayes prepared for the board, demonstrating how the facility complies and came up with those calculations. We do invite Don to respond to any questions that the select board or members of the public through the select board would have. So if there are questions with how these calculations are done, the basis of them, Don's the guy to answer those. Don does not work for AT&T. He's hired as a consultant on site-specific applications. Don does a lot of work outside of the, at least, carrier testimony, representing universities, municipalities, and Don's resume was attached to his report, again, which was submitted with the application. So with that, if there are particular questions, or if, Don, do you want to say a few words about small cell and how long the technology's been around?
Sure. If you give me 1 minute here, I believe it was Don had made a comment earlier about the difference between a small cell and a macro cell. And he's right. And one of the major differences with these small cells is that there only tends to be one antenna, whereas on a macro site, you'll get antennas in what they refer to as sectors. And so if you want to think of it in the most basic term, there's at least 1/3 of the antennas you would find on a macro site, and so that cuts the power to 1/3 of what a macro site would be. For this particular installation at both sites, and so both of these installations, I took into account the maximum amount of power. I also took into account that they'd be on 100% of the time. In addition to that, I assumed that the ground is a perfect reflector for the wave, which it is not, but I assumed that it was. And lastly, I did not account for any degradation of the signal due to atmospheric conditions or foliage or things like that, or even atmosphere, weather patterns or whatever. And so I'm fairly confident that these values that I calculate would be the highest that you would possibly see. And therefore it would comply with not only the FCC, but also the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any luck coming up with a coverage map?
Are you Shannon? Kevin Brewer just emailed them to you?
All right. In the meantime, are there any additional comments? Yes.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Sue-Ann Wong. We are at 1 Sudbury Road. The central issue for us really is that there are a lot of children sleeping within 80 feet of this structure. The technology is new, as Mr. Parris said. We don't know, there's no conclusive, definitive statements from anybody that can state very clearly that there will not be any ill effects. There just aren't. So therefore, there could be. The application states that we are over 80 feet. There's no determination that says 80 feet is better than 60 feet, or 100 feet should be better than 80 feet. There's nothing that tells us what the guidelines are. They just simply aren't. So in the event that there are options, we do not feel that a choice to place this where my daughter's bedroom is 80 feet from this tower and it's on 24 hours, as the gentleman attested, and this is new technology, and there are other options in the area removed from bedrooms, that this application should be approved. Second point is that we, as Rosa has mentioned, have been subject to historic, very stringent guidelines for over 3 years, where we can't even change a color swatch on our house. We've complied to everything they've wanted to keep the town looking how it should look in their view. Everything we see, as Rosa says, is dictated by the town. We can't put a garden shed in the front of our yard because we can't do that. This is a very obtrusive, shiny structure right outside, hovering over our heads. It's very close, and I welcome everybody to go over there, just like HDC did numerous times, to see what we see. And I don't think you would want this 80 feet from your bedrooms unless there was absolutely no alternative, like you live in New York City and you have a real issue with cell coverage. This is not the case. We're not bound to one single location, and I respectfully ask that the board consider that this is a hasty siting of these towers. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have on the screen
You
the
do.
coverage maps. Would you like to describe them?
So these are the coverage map. You should have these in your packet. I'm surprised they're not. But so we refer to these as nodes. So if you look at the two blue stars, one is, right at the intersection of there, correct? And then one further down. So that's 1 Sudbury, then 143 Sudbury. Those potential nodes are, as I said, the blue star. You'll see the coverage that we're getting is, not green would be the best we could do. Blue is certainly acceptable, not ideal, but we're not getting, robust coverage from the existing macro cells. So as you'll see when we go to the next slide, these will light up in green right around them, and you'll see, where I said the coverage is somewhat limited. You'll see kind of those green blob of coverage, if you will, come off each of those two nodes. As Kevin mentioned, it'd be great if we had budget and could do, 50 more of these to cover the area in town, but, they're just, corporate decisions and there's limited capital. So these two do a nice job of connecting to the AT&T network, providing high connectivity around these sites, and really work for the AT&T network. Again, unlike a macro site where we'd get, a big, coverage of green if we were up at a nice 150-foot monopole, but that's not realistic. Questions about the coverage maps?
Yeah, just in the lower left-hand corner, that green dot, does that represent a macro cell?
It does.
Site, and that's on Emerson Hospital.
Correct.
And is it, maybe this is a question for one of the RF people, but when we think about the level of signal that's, hitting anything, whether it's a piece of equipment or a person, would it be fair to say that if you happen to be in one of these green areas that's on the left-hand side today, that is experiencing the same amount of RF, which would now be present in the newly increased areas?
Yeah, but the signal does dissipate quickly. That's why, the low power, so it's not going to radiate by a huge amount. But that's what the coverage is. It's, the ability for the phone, hopefully with enough coverage, to pick up the signal coming off either a macro site or a small cell facility. They're closer to the ground, so they're closer to the user, obviously, than being up on the roof of a building or at a tall monopole structure. I would say, while I say the technology is new, the technology is new only because we're not using all macro sites. But the radio spectrum's been there forever. It'll continue forever. And so we're not using new science. We're still connecting through the same spectrum that we've always used. Matter of fact, AT&T, as you'll see in our application materials, we use very familiar, coverage or spectrum issued, by license from the FCC. So we are required to comply with the FCC standard. The science is not new, and we can certainly have Don Hayes weigh in on that if need be, but these are all frequencies that we're using on macro sites, small cell sites, any type of radio communication.
One of the things to respond to your question about people in the green area, whether they would be exposed at the same rates, let's say, from the macro as they would be from the small cells, it is much less from the small cells. One, because of power that the radios produce and the gain of the antenna, but more importantly, there's a lot less frequency bands that are in the small cells than in the macro sites. So, the macro site could be multiplied by 2, 3, 4 times as many bands than the small cells will have. The other thing that's important to note is that, the closer a user is to the site, the smaller amount of energy their phone uses to connect back. And that's probably the most exposure one gets is from their own phone.
Great. Further public comments, questions from the board?
I guess I would like to reiterate that, we didn't select this site just out of happenstance. It's an existing pole. We've been working with the light plant for a year to a year and a half. I understand that it may be new to some folks who haven't been involved in this. From my side of the ledger, from AT&T side of the ledger, we've been at this for a long time. So I get that people have questions, concerns, and comments. This is the only pole we're aware of that we can license from the lighting plant that'll provide the signal coverage AT&T is looking for. And it's not just happenstance. We're trying to use existing infrastructure. That's what your regulations suggest. People are in residential zoning districts. That's where the coverage is. That's where the coverage, we're the drivers of the coverage. We're the ones that, all of us users, want more and more, faster and faster. And the networks are overwhelmed. In Concord, as I'm sure everyone would agree, it's not easy to site a macro tower. In Concord, I do siting throughout and nearby Lexington, Carlisle. It is a very tough pocket of wireless siting for us land use attorneys. It has been since I started this some 28 years ago when I had brown hair. It's been complicated. It's been frustrating, and if we can get in and provide coverage with these low impact facilities, I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense, and something the FCC and frankly the town of Concord has encouraged us to do.
Okay, I'm going to take a comment from or question from Gail Heyer on Zoom.
Thank you. Gail Heyer, 54 Nancy Road. So I have heard that the small cells have, oh, sorry, I put my camera off. That there's a risk of like fire and like worker safety for the, I don't know, like the utility workers that might have to get to the pole in an emergency or something like that. So can you talk a little bit about how you will ensure that the light plant folks know that this is a cell tower, and is the equipment and the cabinet also a risk for fire, or is it more the antenna that is a concern for fire? And I think, like, I don't know if they like touch it, if there's radiation issues, but I know there's some concern about utility workers and being in close proximity to these devices.
Yeah, so the lighting plant actually licenses the poles to us, so we can't install without them. As I mentioned, in between the meter and the equipment is a shutoff switch, which will stop the electricity from flowing, which powers the equipment and powers the antenna. I'm not aware of any antenna ever catching on fire, but if there were anything to happen, it would probably be in the radio equipment maybe. It's like electronic computer equipment that's inside the cabinet. So the lighting plant is aware. We are subject to their regulations. They're our landlord, frankly. So we have an agreement, I don't know, 60 or 70 page agreement with them as to how we install, how we deal with shutdowns. It's possible they would have to service the pole. We would have to shut down the antenna if they were going to work up at the top of the pole. But from an emissions perspective, you'd have to be right next to the, physically right next to the antenna. You'd have to get up there and hover in front of it somewhere between 3 and 5 feet to exceed the limits. So they're well versed in it, and they're our landlord.
John, I see your hand, but you've already spoken once. Anybody that we haven't heard from? Okay. Is it quick, Don?
Yes.
All right. Then I think we're gonna. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Don Kupka, 39 Devon Street. 2 quick questions for AT&T. One is it technically possible to mask off in some area toward an abutter's house who has a concern? And the second question is, are these antennas materially different from those installed in Cambridge, Boston, Brookline, Newton, Wellesley, and Lexington? Thank you.
Yep, so I can only speak to the ones that I've done. So Lexington, they'd be identical. One might be a little, they're basically all 24 inches. The diameter tends to differentiate between 14 and 16 inches. Lexington would be the same. Wellesley, I did a bunch of those. Those would be the same. I don't know. Boston, are a little bit different. They tend to use more of a DAS system in Boston, but they would all be similar. It's the same type of installation you're going to see, and you know, as the board drives around, you'll start to see these. You're going to see, you're going to look at the utility pole, you're going to notice something on the top, and now that you've had one of these presentations, you're going to say, oh, there's a small cell facility. You'll see the little canister antenna at the top. Got to be equipment on the pole. That's what powers it. You know, an electric meter if the utility is going to charge for it. So yep, they're all similar. I think our competitors use the same types of equipment that we use.
Yes, so I've designed about 1,600 of these that are now deployed throughout New England, and they're pretty much very close to the same on every one. You know, so some variations, but this is the major variety that I designed with.
I don't want to ignore the question either. There was a question about whether we could block it off. We wouldn't block it off. That would be interference with the signal. You know, we're getting signal out to get that quarter, mile or more average distribution of the signal. If we had to block it off in all the areas, there would be no point in spending, the thousands of dollars we're spending to install.
Okay.
All right, can I make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Yes, you may. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we have before us the application. Any discussion on the application?
No, I mean, I think there was a lot of material involved, and I have had some.
Wendy's mic is not working as well, or
It went
maybe
off. Is that better, Diane?
Yes, thanks so
Oh,
much.
okay, sorry. No, I was just going to say, I appreciate all the content that was provided, and you did comply with our application. And it was good to see the coverage maps. That's the one thing I didn't see in the application. I am very much aware that this small cell technology is very different and less harmful, if people are concerned about that. At least that's been my experience and what I've read in my education. So I'm comfortable with this application.
Any other comments?
I think any decision we're going to make is a balancing act
Right.
between different concerns. I think the concern I've heard most about for a long time is safety in town and cell service and gaps. And I think in terms of technology, we have to avail ourselves of the appropriate technology. We're finding it really difficult to put macro cells in town. We have major zoning issues. This appears to be a very prudent addition. It doesn't solve all the problems, but I think I'd be in favor of this on balance. And there's a balancing act. I understand the abutters' concerns, and I understand health issues with cell towers will never go away, but I think on balance, in terms of safety, public safety, communications in town, we've heard loud and clear from the public that we need to move on this. And this is a good part of the solution, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that, Paul. One question I didn't ask, but there's an AT&T service that I believe our police department uses. It's FirstNet or OneNet. It's a prioritized public safety
Yeah, if you're using FirstNet, so AT&T does provide FirstNet service on its network. If police are a subscriber, then they do get a preemptive use of our network, so that if the network gets overwhelmed because of a public safety issue or some sort of disaster, everybody else that's on a particular cell site would get knocked off, and the FirstNet subscribers would take control of.
So do these small cell nodes participate in that system?
So all of our sites, every radio band we have is eligible for preemption. So,
Do you know what FirstNet is? Do you want me to give you a couple of seconds on it, or I'm not looking to expand things?
I do.
Okay.
But I think you already gave us a pretty good description. But
Right.
yeah, it's worth noting that's a potential benefit. I mean, given the coverage area that we're talking about, it is the majority or a big piece of Concord Center. This business district is potentially covered here. Cameron, Mary, any comments?
Nope.
Okay.
All
Are we
right.
ready for a motion?
Yep.
I'm ready to make a motion. So I move to approve the application of a small cell installation by AT&T at 1 and 143 Sudbury Road in accordance with the conditions outlined by Concord Public Works and Concord Municipal Light Plant as included in the Select Board meeting packet.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. One comment I'll make is that this is our first application for small cells under our policy. And I do think that there is potentially some room for improvement in terms of making sure that applications that are proceeding to be being prepared for review and public hearings could be somehow publicized better. So I think that's an action that we can take a look at, because I know that this application was received slightly before town meeting, and yet I personally, and I don't think any of the other members of the board were really aware of it much before or really concurrent with the abutters notification. So I think we could maybe look at whether or not there's a way to have some headlights into that.
Well, we also had the April 19th celebration.
Yeah, we
So we
did.
had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that this is a small step in the direction of improving service through one of the three major carriers in our downtown area. And I think I recognize as a person who lives on the Neck Hill Road within several hundred feet of two macro towers, I recognize that living next to these facilities is also something that gives a little pause, but I'm also convinced that the engineering here is not any different from those. With that, are we ready for a vote?
Yep.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, MCI.
MCI update.
No,
So-
I think the next one is
Oh, is it
the
no?
yeah.
tree.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
the tree.
Sorry, I'm looking at the motions, not the,
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, is that what
7:25.
happening?
which one?
So we're an hour and 40 minutes, no, we're 40 minutes behind schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next item on our agenda is a public
shade
shade tree hearing for a request for permit to remove a public shade tree at 138 Crescent Road. And I believe we have the presenters, the McDonald's. And also, is Aaron McCloskey online?
He's remote.
Okay, great. So, Mr. McDonald, thank you for your patience.
No problem. Given the complexities of what you've been through for the last 2 hours, never mind eating no break, we'll try to get brief. And I thank the board not only for hearing this, but more importantly, because you sent someone out today to look at this, to get an idea of what the setting really was, which
Yeah.
tells me you take these issues seriously, so I thank you for that. I'm the owner of the property, 138 Crescent Road. Been there 35 years, and over those 35 years, I've seen over 200 trees taken down in my immediate neighborhood, behind me, beside me, down the street. And so it's very ironic. In fact, I call it a grand irony that I'm here today over a public tree, shade tree. And I say that's important because I hope the board would agree that this really is an outdated law, which takes your time, and something that Mr. Cataldo ought to look at to do some kind of a change in which we do not allow one person who has no connection to my neighborhood, no knowledge of the problems that I've offered, no willingness to even talk about it after sending her a gentle letter, and it forces us to have this public hearing today. And then, in the meantime, you're trying to deal with 5 other development projects that involve at least 1,000 trees, the ones I've driven by between my area and West Concord. My daughter Lisa will actually now give you the details and answer questions that you may have regarding this particular issue.
Good evening. I am Lisa Westwell. I am the daughter of these lovely people who have lived the last 35-ish years in Concord. I sent a lengthy cover letter, so before I start to reiterate everything in that, do you want me to go a little bit through it? Do you just have questions for us that you'd like to ask?
Can you just give us your address just for the record?
For the record.
Absolutely. Lisa Westwell, 107 City Depot Road, Charlton, Massachusetts.
And that was in your letter, I believe.
Yes, yes, it was.
That's his daughter.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
No, it's not in the letter.
Do you want to review? Do you want her
So
to
a quick
review?
review.
I mean, I've read the letter, I see the pictures.
I've read the letter,
I've read-
right. Yeah, we've read the
Yeah.
letter.
Read the letter,
And,
drove by the house.
Yeah.
Checked out the
Did
trees.
everybody get a chance to look at
Yeah.
that?
Yes,
Yeah.
we read the
Yeah.
letter. I
Yeah.
actually drove by, so
Okay.
I've
Yep,
also
I did.
driven by
Couple
and
times.
looked at the
Yeah.
property.
So, I mean, the short is, this has been going on since 2019, pruning, trying to save the tree. My parents are surrounded by trees. They have a beautiful yard. Fundamentally, this tree has grown into the driveway, and it blocks the view of them being able to go in and out. So we have a line of sight distance measure. Hopefully you did go and kind of look what it might be like to try to back in or out, because it doesn't really make a difference which direction you're going. So since we had one non-abutting resident object who didn't show up for the public hearing but just objected over email, we're coming in front of the board tonight to respectfully request that we be issued a permit to remove this tree.
Okay. Thank you. And we're going to hear from Aaron McCloskey, if you're ready, Aaron.
Yes, good evening.
Hi. Can you give us the tree wardens and public works positioning on this field, on this particular tree?
Absolutely. So we've been working with the McDonald residents for a number of years at this property. They've had some concerns about the tree. Starting back in 2019, we visited the property, performed an inspection of the tree, and as it stated, and in the letter, we've done a number of things: pruning of the tree. We did some structural cabling of the tree. We hired a third-party consultant that did a pretty invasive inspection of the tree and provided the town a lengthy report that was documented and provided at the McDonald's back in 2022. And most recently, they followed up and requested a removal of the tree, and we held the public shade tree hearing. That was publicly posted following Mass General Law, Chapter 87, public shade tree. We did receive one email objection to the removal, and following Mass General Law, we denied the removal of the hearing because we received that objection. That it was a complaint of the residents who were present in the hearing room this evening, and provided an alternative solution to their request. The Mass General Law provides the opportunity for removal if somebody requests a permit to remove a public shade tree from the select board, and that's why it's before the board this evening. They were requesting a permit. It is not an appeal to the hearing. It is a alternative request to remove a tree.
Yeah, so we understand the reason that we're hearing this. The question is, what's the public works, what was the assessment of the health of the tree, and had you not received the single objection, what would your position have been on tree removal?
And so the condition of the tree per the inspection has not changed. It's in a fair condition, and as current deputy tree warden, former tree warden for the town of Concord and previous municipalities, my personal take is, as an appointed official of the town, I work for the public, and if residents request a removal of a tree, we publicly post that for 2 weeks in the newspaper and on the tree, and if I do not receive any objections to the tree, I myself will not object to it. So should we not have received an objection that day, we would not have objected ourselves as the tree warden or the deputy tree warden. Both were present for this hearing, and we would awarded them removal of the tree.
Paul?
Hi. A question on the characterization of fair condition. I'm not a tree expert, and you probably aren't an arborist either, but I looked at the tree. It looked good to me. There wasn't a lot of dead material. How do you characterize a tree as fair condition, which seems to be on the cusp of going to poor condition?
So the fair condition was determined by a third-party certified arborist. The town contract with Davy Resource Group. They're the company that performed a tree inventory back in 2017, and who we contract with regularly to perform kind of independent third-party professional inspections of public shade trees and other trees within the town's jurisdiction. And that was the condition of their report based on observations. The report did provide some recommendations for some pruning and some structural work, which we did have completed by tree maintenance contractors. So the details of that conclusion of the decision of fair condition is detailed in that report, which can be provided for the select board if requested.
One other question I was out there, and it's certainly right at the edge of the driveway, and I could see how it could be blockage, the backing out of the driveway. Have there been near misses? I mean, is this how long has this been a concern for your safety and backing out of the driveway?
I drive a Ford Edge, and I go out of that driveway at 5 miles an hour or less. I have my wife look to the right so she can see if anything's coming. And thank you for being here. You notice if anybody even driving 25 miles an hour, the speed limit, and they get near that thing, I do not see them. I cannot with my car, and I have to back it out because the tree doesn't allow me to back it in without jeopardizing my safety putting it in there. One other comment quickly about, they did come in October 23. That was the last time I saw them. They looked at the tree then. They were going to have an evaluation then. I just never got any result from it. And they were wonderful in 2019. I wrote them a letter. They took off 3 limbs that day. So it's not about response. It's about a willingness and ability to do this for me. Thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, I have a question. So, Aaron, we at Concord Green, where I live, we also had the same firm come in and do an inventory of our trees. We have 750 trees. And when they designated a tree fair, at least my understanding was sometimes they thought that meant it needed work, but not that its health was deteriorating so that it was going to fall down or be diseased or anything. Is that your understanding of what the designation fair means?
In this situation, yes. So that there was a determination of it being fair condition. That was the condition that was back in 2017. It had a very in-depth inspection back in 2022, which resulted again in some recommended maintenance, which was completed. When we look at trees, and we determine that there is a significant risk and the tree is deemed a hazard, we will remove the tree if necessary. That was not the case with this tree. It is a very mature oak tree that has been there for a number of years. So obviously there has maybe some storm damage or some dead wood, and it's a multi-leader tree, and so the town will strive to preserve trees when possible. That was one of the reasons why cabling system was installed back in 2018, and that cable system continues to be regularly inspected and maintained, as been documented in our maintenance practices.
So I think
we try to do everything we can do to kind of keep trees alive and keep them healthy, but eventually trees will get to the poor condition and require to be removed.
Okay, so I think I heard you say that if it was, you wouldn't have removed that tree based on what the inventory, the firm that did the inventory, or from your own observations.
That's correct. The in-depth inspection that was completed recommended some structural pruning and some work,
Great.
Which was completed by staff. Since then, there's been additional request for removal.
Great. Okay, thank you. And
So
I've got one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
So in our packet, we've got a letter from a civil engineer, and I just want to confirm that this wasn't done. This wasn't paid for by the town for the benefit of the public. This was paid for by the applicant.
Yes.
So it was paid. Okay, so it was a paid
And
opinion.
he's available to speak with you tonight if you have questions for him.
No, I
on
just
the
wanted
line
to
of
know who
sight.
paid for the opinion.
Yeah, we did.
So, Aaron, it's Wendy. I have one question for you. It's fair to say that when the town plants trees, we would never plant a tree in the current location as it's situated now, that we would normally plant trees sort of 5 feet back and 5 feet away from a driveway, right? I mean, it's just that this tree has been here for so long that it's where it is, right? So from where I'm going is safety. So you really can't, your view is absolutely obstructed, and it's also obstructed by the hedge of your neighbor as well. But the tree, I can see, causes a significant safety concern. Looking left, you can't see anything. It's easy. I mean, it's a high-risk area, it seems to me. So, but what I was getting to was, from a standard of the town, we wouldn't normally have a tree there, and you wouldn't cite it there because it would be a safety concern. Fair, Aaron?
We have, I would say yes, Wendy, that's a fair statement. When we look at planting trees, and we plant, this year alone, we're planting 250 public shade trees. And by definition, a public shade tree is a tree planted within the public right-of-way, so along the road edge. We look very closely at the siting of each tree specifically, whether it's dig saves for underground utilities or overhead utility conflicts, and also sight lines in proximity to the roadway, houses, any other obstructions. And we look at, what does this tree look like today, and what's it going to look like in 30, 40 years or longer? And is it going to create an issue? We are very careful when we're siting trees. And just as you said, trees, you're either planted or they naturally growing. In some of these areas where they're maybe previously heavily wooded, and then trees are removed because residential properties are put in and select trees are left remaining, those can create a sightline issue at some point in the future, and that's similar to this case. So we look at that when we are requested to inspect trees and remove trees. And again, with this situation, our hands we have to follow public shade tree law, and we can't just authorize a removal because there's a sightline issue when we have to go through that public shade tree hearing process. So,
Yep. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for coming here in front of us. It's a safety issue for me, right? When I look at the tree, I look at the location. I live on a street where I'm always going and cutting down the brush. I'm the strange guy with his saw cutting down the brush so that you can turn left. So I get it, right? So it's a safety issue. It's ruining the driveway, right? And I also, I think, you've spent 7 years trying to, follow all the right things to at first sort of keep it and then, prune it and do all those things. So, for me, I'm in favor of supporting the application.
I did want to touch, something Wendy touched on was something I noticed when I was out there a couple times actually. And it does seem like I think it's rhododendron, is that the big bush that's between 138 and 122. Is that your neighbor's, or is that yours? Because it seemed to me that is 7-8 feet tall, goes right to the edge of the property. And certainly when I was going, on that side of the road, it didn't help that there was an SUV parked right next to that bush when I went by. So, but is there any possibility of working with your neighbor to improve the sight line by removing the bush instead of the tree?
I could not cut that, based on what the civil engineer found for me, I could not cut that back far enough that it would not still have an obstructive view. The other point about what we were hearing from the town, which I appreciate what they've done, in October 23, there's no small limb that fell down the length of my car, hit my hood to the tune of $700 that I had to pay. Had I been out there, I wouldn't be talking to you today. So I agree 100%. It's more a safety issue and a sightline issue than because I agreed with Mr. Bond. It's a pretty tree, but it's a dangerous tree. Thank you.
It also seemed to me to be, the photo that's in our memo also shows that it's one of a cluster of trees that are really almost throughout that, along that set. It struck me that it's going to leave quite a hole if it's gone.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I have a comment that the only reason we're here is because this is a public shade tree. It's a public tree.
Right.
It's not a private tree. And you've mentioned several times that the objection has come from a non-abutter, but they're representing the public interest. So the public has an interest in our shade tree, which is why we have the bylaw. So I want to clarify that this isn't just some random person. It really is someone representing a law that we have to prevent our collective shade trees.
And I would agree with you. However, I would point out that this tree is actually on town and private property. This tree is not fully on the town right away because it's probably, I don't know what Aaron said, how many years old it is. As far as the size of the hole that it's going to leave, it's probably more than possible to be able to leave the stump so that we don't have any erosion other than
I was
the-
talking about the canopy.
Oh, the canopy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the photos show that the house is surrounded by very large trees. I did submit a video, a very short video to Shannon. I don't know if you were
Yeah, we
able
saw
to
it.
view.
It was distributed.
did.
That was
Yep.
me trying to back my Ford Escape, which is much smaller than the edge, out of the driveway. So, I mean, at this point, after 7 years of working with the tree department and pruning, and you can only prune a tree so much before you kill it, we're at the point where you basically our last hope to remove this tree before something happens. Either, my son rides motorcycles. I can tell you he's not doing 25 miles an hour around that curve. That we drove by 2 little kids on bikes and a mom, and it's just not a good combination to be trying to pull out of a driveway, no matter how slowly you go. If anybody comes around that corner, even if they're doing 25 miles an hour speed limit, the risk of hitting the car is high, in my opinion. So that's why we're here. We don't really have any other options to, I understand protecting public trees. As I said in my letter, I'm the conservation administrator in Leicester, land trust president for 20 years. I understand that, but I also feel that there needs to be a balance for residents when they have a safety issue, that we can come before the board and, hope for a ruling that's in our favor so that we don't have to go another 10 years worrying about whether or not somebody's going to get hurt.
Thank you. Do we do a butter notification on these hearings?
This isn't a public hearing.
Yeah, right,
It's not-
so,
It's not a public hearing.
No.
Not a public hearing.
okay.
No, there's no butter notification requirement. This is and just to clarify, public shade tree is a state law. It's a Massachusetts Commonwealth law. It's not a town bylaw. The posting requirement is 2 weeks in a local newspaper. So we post the shade tree hearings in a local newspaper, and then 2 weeks on the tree itself prior to the hearing.
Right. My follow-up question to that is there, how do your neighbors feel about the removal of this tree?
I've had no complaints from any neighbors, no,
About the idea of removing it?
no, because I have two, as he saw, I have 2 giant oaks either side of it,
Okay.
on an island. 9 kids come up there every day.
Okay.
All right.
All right, do we need a motion?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I make a motion to request a permit to remove the public shade tree located at 138 Crescent Road.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
No.
No.
3-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
What are our next steps?
Take the tree down.
Aaron? The next steps?
I have your contact.
Sorry, you're muted.
Oh, he said he has.
We'll
to
schedule the
contact-
removal and you'll be notified.
Oh,
Okay,
Very good, thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
okay. Thank you for coming. Okay,
The vote was 3-2.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
3-2. Okay, MCI.
MCI update. Okay, I'll just do this briefly. As we've been talking about for it seems like quite a while, the primary engagement with agency for planning and visioning on the MCI project officially wraps up today. The board met today to discuss next steps and try and take a status of where we are. I think that it's fair to say that we're really on the cusp of examining that deliverable. It's been described to us Shannon or Megan can tell me whether we've actually received it yet. I know agency is, they have until 11:59 to get it to us. So the board, to try and catch us up a little bit, the board has decided to meet again in 2 weeks after individual members have had a chance to actually read and absorb this. This has an 80-page summary and then technical addenda on the findings of the site. So this is going to be a substantial beach read for anybody that takes it on. There will be a distribution of this, I think, to the MCI advisory board members and also to select board members, I think is appropriate. We're checking it for any accuracies or inaccuracies or real concerns that we might have, and then plan to make it available in places like the library and to the public after it gets that next set of reviews. It looks like it's a good product. The sense of the board that I got from the discussion was, while we looked at the 3 scenarios, probably none of those scenarios exactly hits the mark, and so the advisory board is inclined to take a look at what kind of hybrid of those scenarios might be useful. The report is structured in a way to try to evaluate each scenario's strengths and concerns along a number of dimensions, so that you can see, relatively speaking, how more residential or more mixed use or more commercial might affect it. The other thing that I would just mention by way of the advisory board work is that we did have another quarterly meeting with Mass DOT last week, and they are working on a preliminary design. The 2 things we learned there was the design that they seem to be developing doesn't look like what we were assuming Route 2 might do in any of these visioning scenarios. So right there's kind of a major disconnect, because we didn't have that information, and they have new traffic data and so forth that they're working on. And the design process that Mass DOT is undergoing is about a 5-year process to get done with the design. So that gives us a sense of where we are in terms of timing for that.
And they're in year 1 of that 5 years?
Yeah, they're in 6 months in. So
Okay.
I would say, though, that my reading of it is that while it may take them 5 years to get a design that they're actually looking to fund on the transportation improvement plan at the state level, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of what that design is going to look like, something that you could plan around much sooner than that.
How much sooner?
Even in the 3 to 6 month time frame, they're engaging with us. They've promised us another quarterly meeting. There's a more technical meeting with our traffic planner scheduled for mid-July, which will further develop it. Right now, they seem to have a preferred routing of Route 2, and the real question is what happens to Commonwealth Avenue, and how does that local transport work?
3 to 6 months from now?
Yeah,
For design.
for design of Route 2. Something that one could work with in planning the site. So given all of that, it's up to the advisory board, I think, to meet, digest what they know, and try and really craft what types of recommendations do they feel comfortable making. And I think it's up to us to have a conversation about what kind of recommendations do we need them to provide us, so that that can inform our pending negotiations with the state and DCAM over the site. So we're not quite as far along as we thought we might be on June 30th, but it is a boatload of work has been done, and I think it's really appropriate at this time to really digest what we know and let the board work on, put their heads down and actually go to work now on what they think Concord is saying. And I think there'll be some socialization. It's a good thing that the town meeting appropriated the money under Article 33, because that gives us some opportunities to pursue additional services in gaps or other kinds of specific information needs that may be developed as a result of digesting this report. So that's kind of what I have. The chairs of the advisory board are, more than willing to come and talk to us when they have a sense of consensus from the board. But the board really needs to have the opportunity to read this report and weigh in on what it tells us.
So,
Mark, what's the current role and activity of our elected representatives in the whole DOT 36-month timeframe? Is the answer it is what it is, or could be some acceleration and coordination in that design? I mean,
I think
if you can't answer it,
yeah, I think the role of our elected reps is going to be, to some extent, what we ask them to advocate for us. Mass DOT, I would say, is going out of their way to collaborate with us, and what was evident in some of what they shared with us was the fact that they took into account information that we provided about the site that they didn't have. For example, our interest in potentially siting a water pumping station on town land behind the gas station at the Rotary, and an understanding of the historic structures and the fact that the cemetery is there and needs to be respected and so forth. So there is definitely information going back and forth between us, so we're having an opportunity to inform that design. I think that it is a good question of what information, what do we want to advocate for is an open question that we are putting in front of, certainly I'm putting in front of the advisory board, because I think they're just not ready to quite provide us with those answers yet.
in my quite informal discussions with our elected representatives, they've said, tell us what you need.
Right.
And so maybe
There's a willingness.
There's a willingness if we ask them specifically to, I don't know, try to move this along on the DOT side.
I don't know if anybody knows this, but we did have an earmark in theory that was potentially going into the budget process. I don't know what its fate has been, but I've been hearing on the radio all day that the state appears to be nearing a budget agreement, and so it might be interesting to check on that too, because obviously more resources would be better in this situation. Mary,
Mark,
you had a question.
I do. So this 80-page summary,
Yeah.
When will that be available to the public? Because first of all, I have a follow-on question to that, which is, so when will this information be available to the members of the Land Use Working Group? Because they're going to want to know, what the consultants have come up with as they do their work to figure out if there are any municipal needs that would go on that site. And then I guess my follow-on question is, it's really all about how do you integrate the work of these two. So are the consultants now taking a pause while the Land Use Working Group does their work? I mean, how do we?
So the consultants are more than taking a pause. As of midnight tonight, we have no more money to spend on that.
But we allocated money, right?
Yeah, but our contract would be fulfilled with this deliverable.
Okay.
And so
we're done.
we are discussing whether or not there's any kind of extension, and there are some phases. Megan's gonna help us say exactly the right words on this.
Yes, the contract expires on June 30th, but with additional funding, there may be, an opportunity to do some additional work with FY26 town meeting approved funding. To do an additional scope. So when we first procured these services, we procured, we looked for tasks 1 through 6, but we contracted through tasks 1 through 4. And so that work will be completed later this evening. And we have some funds available for tasks 5 and 6, which is more of the zoning work. But the advisory board is kind of mulling over, do they feel like we're ready to move to that phase? And is there additional work that needs to be contracted to get us to be ready for that? So those decisions haven't been made yet, but there's kind of a recognition that this has been a sprint effort, and the material needs to be reviewed and absorbed by the folks. And then if there's, this is going to be a longer process. So what else do we need to kind of get to the next spot? But I think your question's too, Mary, about when is this going to be available to the public?
Right.
We're getting a copy of it this evening.
Yep.
And I think at that time, the advisory board is going to review it and think about if they were to make changes in a future contract, what would those be? So there may be a different version if we, kind of contract for additional work, but it will become a public document when it arrives in our inbox this evening.
It will.
The concern is that because this is the work product of a third party, and before we adopt it as
Yes.
a document that the town is planning or working around, it's important to make sure that if there are any errors or misstatements or factual concerns, that those get reviewed and potentially get addressed. And because the consultants is officially done, the discussion was, should there be a cover letter, an addendum, something that position, if anything of that nature is found, the advisory board would prefer to be able to recognize that, make a statement about it, and include that as well with distributions of the document, just because of it. And it has been a big fast lift to do this. I think everybody recognizes that if not for the state's budgeting deadline, we would have allowed more time for these tasks. So we're quite pleased with the level of effort and the amount of work that the agency has done to get us this far. We just really need to digest this information and figure out how to act on it. And the intention of the advisory board is to meet in 2 weeks and have a discussion about what did we learn from after we've done this detailed read as individuals, as well as try and map out a schedule for what are those next steps based on what we think we know.
What next steps for the advisory board?
For the advisory board and for the engagement as a whole. I've put forward that this does lead us into a strategic negotiation over land acquisition, and that it may be necessary for the advisory board to have its own executive session to really discuss what their recommendations are for negotiating strategies, and it may be important, I believe, for us as a board as well, once we've had a chance to do that, to do the same thing, either separately or jointly with them.
But Mark, that's separate from the document and potentially.
Separate from the document.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a preliminary document subject to change with the appropriate disclaimer. There need to be a disclaimer in there, which I'm sure they're thinking about.
Right.
Both factual disclaimers and, I think we'd be pretty safe.
Yeah. But that's why initially we thought we might have an update from the chairs, but when we realized exactly where we were given the date, it just didn't seem practical to actually ask the chairs to do that, since they themselves haven't read the final.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
But to Mary's point about how that activity meshes, merges, blends into the land use, we've all been thinking about that for a while. We can't resolve that here, but that's definitely pretty high priority, because there's a lot of process and learnings that the MCI advisory group that can be integrated into what the larger group does, for sure.
Yep. Okay. And I think that's what I've got by way of an update on that. I know we're running pretty far behind. Okay. Is Kari Tari available to us? We have the discussion.
I am here.
Okay. Sorry to keep you waiting so long, Kari.
But all right.
For an hour.
So this is about the special election debt exclusion.
Yes. And the timeline that was included in your packet was approved on June 3rd when you discussed holding a special town election in order to place before the voters 2 debt exclusion questions for articles that were approved at Concord's 2025 annual town meeting. They were Article 8, debt exclusion for road maintenance, and Article 13, the amenities building. And according to this timeline, tonight you are requested to vote to call a special town election for August 19th, and to review and approve the language for both ballot questions as prepared by bond counsel. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, Mary has a question.
I have a quick question. So, Kari, can you just
Yes.
explain to me why the language of these ballot questions never specify the amount?
I believe that it is because the appropriation is done by town meeting. So the dollar amount is included on the warrant article, and the approval is done at the ballot.
So we're
I don't know if
approving
that-
what was voted at town meeting?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, but to that question, from the larger public, we hope that there'll be a big turnout for this, and there'll probably be many people who weren't part of the 300-400 people who were at the meeting. So I think the dollar amount is pretty germane to somebody voting on this.
And will it be in the pro and con statements, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
it
you
will
for-
be, right?
for
So
mentioning that.
it won't be
Yeah, the
missed.
voter information will be mailed
Right.
to every household, and it will include the language of the vote taken at town meeting,
Good.
the ballot question language, and arguments for and against each question.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you.
If I could just clarify, the language is specified by state law, and it does not include the dollar amount, which is, obviously, it is problematic, which is why the town adopted the special provision of Mass General Law that allows us to include the pro and con statements. But you could not even amend the language to include the dollar amount if you wanted to be in compliance with Mass General Law.
Mass General Law, the wisdom. Okay,
Okay.
great.
All right. Are
Thank
we-
you.
So helpful.
No questions on the timelines?
And any other discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion. Let me move make a motion to move to hold a special town election on Tuesday, August 19th, 2025, following affirmative votes under the following annual town meeting warrant article 8 and 13, with the language included in the select board meeting packet.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in
No.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we finally are at
Goals?
goals.
This is our first discussion.
This is our, yeah, this is our first discussion. So what was included in the packet was a draft for discussion of some goal areas and that I was working up. And immediately following that is our 2025 goals as we discussed previously at the, I believe, March 17th meeting.
That's correct.
So we can consider what levels of accomplishments we have with those goals and whether there's anything that should be pulled forward. I would note that we are already receiving some input from other boards and committees, which is great. I think that one of the things, one of the letters we got included the idea that goals that we set should be championed and in fact implemented to a great extent by those committees in our committee structure, as well as the town staff should be supporting what these goals are. And so I think that as we consider how to set them, we should look at them with that in mind as well. So I'm going to open the floor for reaction, and given the hour, I think we'll try to book a little bit more time in the next meeting on this. But I certainly wanted to go around the room and get your initial reactions. I know that there's been a few of you have also reacted in a written form, which is appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a couple thoughts, Mark. I mean, I think it's a really good start. Just a couple things. I would like to see a bit more on financial goals. So I see that there's some things around like revenue goals and reserve policy. You know, and I can give more written feedback too, but I'd, you know, suggestions, right? Not just dumping it all on you, but you know, I would love to see something more around sort of, you know, how we're managing our budgets, our benchmarks. I do think we've seen a rising level of debt and how we're sort of looking at that and sort of projecting it. You know, some things that just sort of look at, you know, holistically some of the impacts around housing and some of the new developments and sort of impacts on services and just some of that, you know, some of that forward planning. As well as I'd like to see something more or something from the tax committee and some of the output there. So those, I mean, there's just some other like specific wording things that I could suggest, but I don't want to, you know, that to me was the biggest place where I saw some, maybe some ads.
Right.
Okay, go.
Sure.
First of all, I really like the fact that they were crisp and actually looked for, you know, measurable actions. So I appreciate that. The thing that struck me was some of these land or facilities goals that you have here. Where are they?
At the top, I think.
E, it's letter E, town facilities. A lot of that is going to be the work resulting from the work of the land use working group, which has a 12-month timeline.
That was very intentional.
You want us to finish sooner?
No, I just wanted to make sure that it was directly in support of the goal. Not every goal gets finished in the year that it gets placed on our list.
Okay. So just as long as you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still on the 12-month timeline, which, as you know, most committees ask for extensions.
I tried to pull forward the things that I would like to see this fiscal year.
Okay. And then the other thing that I would thinking of adding would be under the finance management, I'd like us to consider rewriting the charge of the finance committee, because the existing charge was written in 1970. And especially since we got into kind of a debate about the role of the select board vis-a-vis the FinCom regarding the establishment of reserves. So I think looking at that and rewriting that, updating, it needs to be updated, because 1970 was a long time ago.
The finance committee is covered by its own bylaw.
Yeah, but it
And
goes by.
we could look at that. I will say that I met with the chair of the finance committee, and we discussed trying to work in parallel to resolve the questions around reserve policy. And we agreed that we would prioritize that. So we'll be seeing some discussion, including I think there's some information out there that could be considered a primer on reserve policy. There's certainly some clarification about what the stabilization fund that town meeting appropriated money to is, what purposes it can be used at. I think that we've all seen the legal opinion that came from town council that suggested that when it was created, it was only available for capital, but because it was created then and the law around general stabilization funds has evolved, it could potentially be used for other things. I think that certainly I had agreement with the chair of the finance committee that we would probably all be best off if we just thought about how to craft an actual mandate for that reserve fund, or potentially.
I don't have a problem with having the reserve policy outlined here, but I'm saying we could maybe broaden it to include a rewrite of, or a review of the charge that they have on their website, which they use to guide their work.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I can put that in writing if you
Yeah,
want.
that would be great to look at markup. Wendy, did you have comments?
Well, there were a couple of things that I just, I can put some follow-up in writing for some of these, but some of the questions I had, one was on, just go through on the town facilities, on there's a reference to 2229. One of the things I thought of, we're supposed to give site preparation suggestions to Maximus, and I don't know if that's something that we think should be a goal. I know the work group might talk about it, and, Paul, you might know more details on that. It said for 2026, we should be prepared to do that. So I don't know if the work group, land group should do that, but I want to keep that on our radar screen. And then in terms of audits and free cash, I don't like this on time and error-free, but I'd like this to say, let's complete the FY '24 and '25 audits this year, because we're behind. And obviously, we want to get good estimates of free cash, and maybe we want, to your point about finances, maybe we want some just periodic updates on financial status. I think that's kind of what Cameron was getting to, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be good.
I like that idea.
Yeah, okay, and then, I don't know about the committee process, around, I know APP 10 is one statement, but we've talked about trying to improve the process around committee recruitment, documenting openings, and maybe we need to do more about advertising. Hey, we have, we're in the process of turning over committees, maybe there's more we can do there. And in sustainability, we haven't done the climate action plan, so I know Brad sent something, but that was our goal this year originally, but now that we've got funding for this coming fiscal year, we ought to put that on this list for sustainability. And then there's a lot here for CMLP, like the substation bidirectional power flow. Are we really ready to do that? We haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything. So I want to make sure we're not overly ambitious here. And I actually thought there was money that's really required to do that work. So I don't know.
Well, it needs to be on the capital plan. I think it's been identified as a potential risk to the power grid of the community for a considerable period of time. And so I was thinking of raising its visibility. And to some extent, as I said in my intro, I'm thinking about, because we're going to talk about our liaison assignments in the mid.
Yeah, but I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a great one. It's been on the strategic plan for a while. I just haven't heard anything about it. So I want to make sure that these are also reasonable, practical, and that they're achievable.
So they're also motivational, or
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right, and we've been hearing about time, and to some extent too, the time of use billing. I put it here because I thought that we need to raise the visibility of that, because it is going to be a relatively
huge,
substantial change. And certainly what we heard earlier this evening had me thinking about where in all of this are we prioritizing the discussion about safety on the roadways, even as we embark on a more
the roadway
long-term plan for that. So I would put that forward as something that we may want to do. So I wanted to give this a first read. Paul, you had some feedback as well.
Yeah, I had a
Were
few.
you done?
Let me just
Okay.
Let me just hit the highlights here, because I sent you some notes. Under the self-service, I think these are good. I added that we should do a complete analysis of the technical options, which we start to do. I think we have more to do on the technical options in terms of strategically. What you have here is fine, but I think what we've heard today is we may have to think about other technical options. So I would kind of add that to a goal.
what do you mean by that, Paul? Other technical options?
What are the options?
What are they, besides so this speaks to large macro towers, right? The options here. We heard tonight that there are other technical options. I don't think we've done a complete analysis of that. We scratched the surface here, and so, I mean, as far as a goal, I think we should understand before we just jump into, the solution is zoning for big macro towers as part of it.
Well,
there are other solutions.
The select board has voted to go with macro tower. I mean, we have, I don't know, I think this was last year, not when I was the chair, but I think when Henry was the chair. Didn't we have a vote, help me out here, Megan, didn't we have a vote where the select board basically instructed the town to move ahead with the landfill with something in Concord Center? I mean, didn't we already have?
Well, the RFPs.
Yeah.
Sure. The landfill.
You need coverage, the priority was coverage.
I guess I'm worried, I'm
not saying in addition, I think we should look at other technical options, not to replace that, but, is the solution just that? So we can talk about that later, so I would just add an analysis of technical options. I think in wastewater capacity, I think discussions with EPA and Mass DEP, even before we actually submit the permits, we had a nice discussion today. The 2229 negotiations have begun.
did.
And I threw in the possibility of wastewater permit, not for MCI Concord,
Yeah,
but, and it was not rejected.
Yeah.
And we're going to get them some information on that. So I think there are larger conversations that we need to lead on wastewater capacity, in addition to what we have here.
Certainly directionally, that was what I had in mind.
I think on the transportation, you scratched the surface, but there's a comprehensive transportation and mobility study that the Transportation Advisory Committee has been on the hook for.
Yeah.
We really, really need that. We heard that tonight, and you know, that lays out all of the public safety, sidewalk, bike lanes. We need some template, we need some plan for that. I think we should make that our goal and pass that down to the TAC to get that done. It's been pending for a while.
And they're collaborating with the DPW
Right.
also, right? I mean, so there's, we have to be looking for
I should
those,
hope so.
those joint,
Exactly.
collaborate across committee
Isn't it part of
stuff.
the debt for the roads?
No, transportation's
safety
working
and
with DPW. So
We
when
have
they-
the money, but we don't.
Yeah, no, I'm
About
not,
the
yeah, I'm just saying it should be coordinated in with that.
The
too.
transportation-
I'm not saying we
Yeah.
know all
Yeah,
of
The
the.
Transportation Advisory Committee and Public Works have to
Yeah.
operate.
Right,
Yeah,
they need to
that's all I'm saying, is
prioritize.
like
They're helping to
connect that.
prioritize.
But we
Right.
did, sorry.
And we
We did-
definitely heard that we need to, there seems to be quite a few of these
Safety,
kinds of
yeah.
concerns that have been raised about traffic calming, about sidewalks and safety. And there needs to be a way to figure out what the path is for this, because the frustration is evident. And I think it certainly came out today.
Well, and now we have some funding,
Yeah.
so I think maybe it's a new.
No,
Right,
We commission.
We don't have the funding until the election.
This is
But
true.
I'm
No,
just saying,
I know.
like,
But I mean,
that- all I'm saying is that needs to connect to this. That's all I was trying to say.
I'm saying that as a goal, we need a plan.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know, action follows that plan and funding follows that plan.
Right.
It's a plan for how to improve
Yeah.
the things we're talking about. So we do have a mechanism for
Yeah.
doing that, and that's
Yeah.
the plan.
Finishing that transportation.
I think we need a
studies.
separate goal on the 2229 Main Street negotiations. I'd like to see a separate goal on commercial development. I'd like to see us step up, and whether it's a quantitative goal or, you know, over the next year to 3 years, we talk about commercial development, what does that mean? Does it mean going from 5% to 7%? It's something quantitative. We need to put some effort behind commercial development. I just didn't see that in here. So, and you mentioned the climate action plan, which, on the sustainability. I'd like to see us evaluate the effectiveness of the new organizational structure under Megan. We don't have a sustainability director. We probably need to take a look at that periodically, and should that be a goal? I mean, it's underway, but I think we,
Well, maybe that's something the Climate Action Committee can help us evaluate themselves as one of their goals.
a lot of this is done by other committees, a lot of it. So
Right.
those are some of the macro things that I picked up on this.
The challenge is to keep these crisp so that we can accomplish them.
Well, and be clear so you know what they are,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Well,
So,
you know, yeah, smart goals. If we can make any of these quantitative,
yep,
as much as we may, it's a double-edged sword.
gets worded. Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, the pilot program, for example, establish new agreements, great. Should we
Pre-agreements with
set a
A quantitative goal.
quantitative goal for it? I think we should.
I think that's a great idea.
So wherever we can set quantitative goals, it's going to really
Agree.
help us.
All right.
I think so.
Okay.
Just keep in mind, you have a lot of boards and committees, and there are some good assignments here that you could give to boards and
Right.
committees, Paul. You-
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This
Just-
is delegation on.
Yes.
on space.
Right.
I think they would appreciate it too,
Yeah.
being able to connect,
So that was one of my goals, is to put it out there. I also reordered them because it seemed to me that development and land use is really top of mind for this year. You know, I did some of this right on the heels of town meeting, and it felt like we really did have some challenges establishing what what we should be budgeting against, and, you know, was disappointed in the sort of disconnect between the resources that we had available and the resources that people, that particularly the Finance Committee, thought were available when they were doing that. And so I was looking to close that gap. You know, and I think effective and transparent has always got to be there. I did rename the sustainability one to sustainability and ecology, and added Warner's Pond there, because I think that when we bring a task force together and ask people to work hard on something, I think it behooves us to take those recommendations and run with them. So that was my thinking about that. And certainly some of the most recent incidents that are really have, I think, awakened the town once again to the fact that civility, tolerance, and inclusion are things that always have to be on the agenda. And so when I wrote these specific words, I was thinking in terms of what we're going to do from this board's perspective to really lead on that. And I appreciate the suggestions that we already have around those things. So with that, we'll ask you to respond with your suggestions, and we'll take another run at this. I'd love to be able to think that we're going to finish it in the next meeting, but if we don't, it'll be close enough to work with. And I think directionally, these are the things that are on our agenda, and we should be talking with our assigned task forces or committees about that. And with that,
Well, and just to Carrie's point, I think as we lay out these goals, we should probably identify the committee or the task force that would have
exactly.
Who would we delegate it to?
Responsibility.
Yeah.
Very good.
And thereby also, to some extent, which one of us as a select board member is sort of primarily sponsoring the accomplishment of that goal. So we can each have some of them in our portfolio, was what I was thinking. So if you don't see yourself really owning some of these, then we haven't written them well enough yet. Okay. Are we ready to move on to liaison assignments?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. Yes,
Clarify to send your comments to me.
please. Through our usual magic, send them to Shannon. So that she can,
Is there a timeline? Like, do you want them, give me a date? That helps.
Yeah.
I would love to see them within a week from now, recognizing that this is 4th of July week, and
All right.
you know, a week could be 10 days, but in time for them to make it into the next packet, which would be Wednesday.
Middle of next week.
Next week,
Yep.
so sooner the better. Okay. Great. So you saw the draft of the select board liaison assignments. I have just one sort of breaking news kind of comment on them. I believe that I had redlined out the Concord 250 executive committee altogether. But I did meet with the current co-chairs today, and they have proposed that committee, many of the subcommittees are done. And their scope
Not
is
all.
Not all. There's still 5 left, and there is some ongoing work. So that is one that we should have a liaison to. They've also, and I've tentatively scheduled it for I think the first meeting in August. They're going to ask us to reduce the size of that committee. Right now, it's authorized between 9 and 15 people. Because of all the subcommittees they had, but they're actually interested in going down to 7. So if we just made that simple change, then they can shrink that much. And
Sure.
So that means it still requires a liaison. Is what
still
you're saying.
requires a
Okay.
liaison, it needs a charge update from us, which I think is going to be literally a one word or one phrase, the number of members. They are proposing new co-chairs, so you know, the current co-chairs have done a magnificent job, and we thank them for their service.
One of the, back to the goals momentarily, the lessons learned. I don't know if the intention of continuing that is to, you know, get the lessons learned out of that committee's activities. We heard about that in the public comment in terms of shuttle service. There's some best practices that have come out of the 250th that we can adopt theoretically for town function, and I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Is that part of their charge?
They reminded me that they owe us a final report, and that final report is coming by December of '26, because they will have activities going all the way through, you know, next 4th of July, basically. They're on track to finish by that time. So they do have, and presumably they're collecting the information that they need to write that.
Well, maybe it's related to that or separate, but you know, the learnings and the practices.
Yeah.
There are some things we can universalize. I
Is the
believe.
Permanent Memorial Committee still active?
Separate, yeah.
But it's
under the.
that's what,
this.
yeah, I was gonna ask about that, because
Yeah,
it's,
is that-
it's,
so
I
is
know,
that
I know
still
it's still active.
I was reminded that the original memorial
Took 5 years.
took 10 years to be developed, so I
They
could
met 2 weeks
envision
ago,
some-
I know that.
I could envision at some point, there will need to be a public process around that. I can envision eventually pulling that permanent memorial out and it being the
Making some.
last thing standing
Yep.
from
Okay,
this.
but right now,
But
that would be
from-
under the
right now, it's
250.
still under that.
Okay, so we have to take out the red line that's on.
Yep.
The other thing I want to point out is that under my liaison assignments, the task force, the Concord Center Cultural Task Force no longer exists.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And the Concord Local Cultural, blended into, it's the Concord Cultural Council. So it's not the Concord Local Council.
Yeah.
So those two are merged.
Those two have merged into the Concord Cultural Council.
Okay.
Just one
And,
less committee for me.
I think the tax committee is not on this list, right?
Oh, the tax relief
Task Force.
evaluation task force.
Task Force.
Who's on that?
Me.
Wendy?
Oh, actually, I'm not on it. I'm just a liaison.
Right,
Oh, right,
it's
but you're
the
the
liaison.
you're the
right.
liaison,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And then, I'm assuming, Hanscom Field Advisory is listed twice. I'm assuming it's,
There are actually two committees. There's the
Yeah, actually,
Hanscom Area Town Select
Wendy and I
Boards.
chatted a little bit about
Yeah.
merging those together.
Well, because, no, then there's the Hanscom
Hats.
Area, no, then there's
There's hats.
Hanscom Area Advisory Commission, which Terry has been voted as the at-large member, but there's supposed to be a liaison assignment as well, and so,
so is
Isn't
that
that to
correct then, that it's
So,
both
Yeah.
Terry and
well,
Paul?
that's by the charge of the committee.
No, that's
It's
fine,
supposed to-
I'm
No,
just
but Paul
asking
and
for
I also-
clarification. So if that's, yeah, so it's correct that it's listed twice. There
Right,
actually
there's a
is,
select board representative and an at-large representative
Right.
to that.
and
Where's
Terry
hats?
will stay as the,
Yeah.
because she was already put in
She
place
was already
for some
voted
period
as
of time.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wow,
cool.
okay, that's weird.
I'm sorry, so that,
So Paul and I did talk about it. So on this list, I'm on the HATS committee, and he thought it actually made some sense that we switch, that I'll take on that advisory committee as well.
As well as
Probably makes
that.
sense. And then Paul will take on the West Concord Advisory Committee, and that will not be mine, right? You still want to do that? That'd be
Okay.
great.
Any other swaps that we?
Well, just before we go in there, and then, sorry, I'm just asking for clarification.
Go ahead.
Is Warner's Pond done?
Yes.
Okay.
So that final report is being presented to the NRC on the 16th of July.
Mm.
And so it becomes NRC work from here out.
there will be a new entity formed.
Oh,
from
another
that
committee,
there
right.
At some point.
Yeah.
It'll be a subcommittee of the NRC.
That's NRC.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So who has NRC? If you,
I do.
oh,
So the other thing on here, Mark, is you and I talked about the Concord Housing Development Corp. And the Concord Housing Authority going to Cameron.
Right.
And Cameron and I spoke about this today, but that was after this had already been published, and I'm fine with that.
Are you also okay with it, Cameron?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
I was hoping that as a swap, I would pick up the rec commission.
How do you feel about that?
It doesn't, so here's my take on it. So rec, it's fine. I think Paul has come from rec too and was also maybe interested in it, so I don't want to kind of get in the middle.
I'm surprised at how popular rec.
Everyone wants the rec commission, so.
Update on it, that's all.
Yeah.
I put in a bid for recreation for
did
two
you?
players to be named later.
So I would kind of defer.
Yeah,
More than,
very-
so it's not that I have to keep it, but I would just sort of
Yeah.
defer on that one. So that's that. I don't know if there was anything else. I have one other general comment, unless Mary, but I kind of interrupted you, so
That's
you go
okay,
back.
that's okay. So I was just
Yeah.
laying the groundwork for
Yeah.
what we,
Yep.
so I've given up that, I've given up the Concord Housing Authority and the Concord Housing Development Corp., and I think that's a good move, because I think fresh eyes on those committees is a really good idea. But given that I have a pretty light load, and if you want to balance things out.
Well, you also have the land use working group.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
one of the new notations on this list is that little paren M,
Yep.
which means you're a working member of something.
That's right.
And
The Concord Municipal Affordable Housing.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And so I tried to, those sort of count double, especially task forces that have got large jobs to do.
You mean 9 months?
Yeah, in 9 months. Exactly. One idea that came up just in the last day or so was Paul has offered to take on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. I'm inclined to accept that. I didn't know whether there was anybody else that had any thoughts on that. If I do really believe that we need to address the conversation that's going on both in incident reporting and in terms of the community culture that under which some of the things that we've heard of happening at the school recently have occurred. And I think that we do need to lead on that. I think we need to work with the school committee, the Human Rights Council, and the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Commission on that. And I appreciate that Paul has already made some comments, and I think that that it's important to endorse that. I didn't respond immediately to that because I haven't really had an opportunity to discuss that with the chairs of the board. So I'm going to be persuaded to do that, but you may see that change come up in.
And I have been made aware of the DI Commission's made some significant progress on the reporting part and on the communication part. They were going to make a statement tonight, but Rose couldn't make the meeting here. I think I don't know if she talked to you about getting that on the agenda for one of the next few meetings, sort of a briefing on what they've done.
Not yet,
They've
but
done some interesting things which, we have to figure out who takes the lead on, so that the type of communication that they're talking about. They talk about incident reporting system, a database, a communication system. I think that there's a lot of good ideas that we have to just kick around.
Yeah.
We've talked earlier about an incident reporting system, and there wasn't really a consensus on the board whether we thought that was a good idea or not, so hold
Well,
that.
I don't know if it's a good idea. I mean,
Right, so well, I thought you presented it as was a good idea, so I just want.
well, I'm saying it's their idea that
Yeah,
so.
okay, I just went.
And then,
That's it's just a long discussion. That's all.
Yeah, it's a longer discussion.
I just wanted to say that they, in the context of what Mark is talking about, they have made some progress.
have
That
some
we need to
ideas.
hear what they've done.
Okay.
It is a longer discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to take a crack at making sure that I have this right. So through Shannon, I will distribute what I hope is a clean copy.
And can I make one other general comment? So I'm going to just, Wendy, as I look at your slate, right? So it's not all about the number of committees, but you do have the most. I do notice sort of And I'm looking at balance, right? So I just do notice also assessor, zoning, planning, finance, audit, tax. I
Yes.
just wonder if there's a little bit of maybe breaking up some
I'm
of
more than
that.
happy to give out a couple
So
committees.
I'm not looking for a ton more work, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
I mean, Mary made the same comment to you about housing, right? Hey,
Yeah.
look, let's get a blend, let's get a mix.
Yep.
So it's not that I have any one particular one there that I'm like, oh wow, but I just think, maybe we think about just a little bit of
Yeah.
kind of breaking that up a little bit.
No, I like the idea of having a mix under each of us as opposed to just focusing on
Yeah.
a specific area.
Yeah.
And I think it leads to collaboration
Yep.
amongst us, so I agree with that.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be able to tell you which one or how
Yeah,
they
no.
all work exactly. You
It's
know
just a
better
thought.
than me,
Mhm.
but it's.
Yeah. And for people, I'm trying to make sure that some of the that each one of us is actually running with at least one of sort of the major initiatives.
Yep.
And because I think that there is a lot of important work to be done, and I think that, so what jumped out at me was by asking Wendy to take over finance, that would naturally put the reserve
Yeah.
policy in some of those. By having you work with the school department, that would help us build some of those bridges and support the ideas of what we need to do in land use in particular, because we need to understand what those options are, and that feeds into what Mary's doing in that case. The roads are, and coming up with a broader plan around that is going to be heavy lifting for the Public Works Commission, not to mention the activities associated with MCI. And, by holding the MCI Advisory Board, I think that board really needs to move into a very strategic and sensitive set of discussions, that we really are just, have finished a year, but that's been enough time to gather. Hopefully it's a decent set of facts and understand what the options might be at this point.
Yep.
So that's going to be a really important piece of work for this. So that's kind of what I was trying to do, was to really spread the wealth and make sure that a major initiative was in everybody's portfolio.
Yeah, no, and I think it's good, and I think it's very, very thoughtful.
Okay.
So it's just, just you go through just some of the.
Yeah,
It's around the edges.
So let me, certainly, if you have further suggestions, I would say, talk to each other about swaps and let me know and I will try to publish a finalized version of this week. If you see any errors from that, let us know and we'll get this out, because I know that other boards and committees are waiting on it
Yeah.
Okay, good.
as well. Okay?
Good.
Great.
Yep.
You're doing a terrible job of time management today, but,
Yeah.
okay.
You'll get better.
I think we're at the town manager's report, if I remember the agenda right.
We are.
Well, I'm happy to go now. The chair's report is before me, but I don't know if
Okay.
you
Let me see what my notes were for
shared
that.
at the
Sorry.
beginning of the meeting.
We'll get this paperwork thing down eventually.
Covered a lot already.
Yeah,
so.
chair's report.
Yeah, I think my main item on that was gonna be the status of MCI, and I kinda
Yeah.
covered that
Yeah, you
earlier.
did.
Okay, all
Go
right.
for it.
All right, so I bet you're wondering about the AC system here at the townhouse. Yeah, so we have a solution. I know I've sent you one or two emails in the interim to let you know what's going on here. The chiller that sits over at 30 Monument Street does need to be replaced. That's the only solution to bring the AC system back here at the townhouse. The solution is $150,000 or less. We have that in our capital facilities budget for buildings. You might recall that we're very general in how we appropriate capital for facilities, because we're going, we have ideas of what work we'd like to do, and then something happens and we have to pivot. So we do have that in the budget. It is an all-electric system. It has a higher efficiency than the system that we have now when it was up and running. It's at least 20% more efficient, but we are we're still evaluating the specs on the equipment. It might be higher than 20%, more than 20% efficient. So the unit is in manufacture. It's expected to be completed July 15th. It then needs to be shipped here, and so we're looking at an install around August 15th. From my perspective, that means we need to move all public meetings out of this building. You know, when the heat gets into this building, it just doesn't. There's not enough ventilation to cool it off. It's hard enough during the day. It's worse in the evening. There's issues with, there's still a lot of pollen. We have a lot of people that are impacted by the pollen. So we'd like to move all board and committee meetings from this building for July and August. The public meeting room at CMLP is coming back online. It should have been back online today. We can broadcast live from that meeting room. I would assume most of you have been over there. It's a very nice meeting room. It has its own access, so it doesn't disturb the rest of the building. There is one restroom. So I think it probably makes the most sense, at least for the select board, to move over there. But I will work with the town clerk, and we will start moving people. In terms of staff here during the day, we do have alternate work locations. It's very difficult for some of the staff that work here to move on a short-term or interim basis. For instance, the town clerk's office works with the state computer system. The state, when we moved out of this building for however many months to do the renovation, the state actually had to come and move the system. We have our treasurer collector's office. They're working, they're doing all of our treasury work. It's not easy for them to move to different locations. So we do have some alternatives, and we will just move people around as we need to. But I think most of the staff in this building expect to just be here through the summer. I wanted to give you a quick update on a couple of other projects. Our Kais Road roof projects, the design has been complete. We actually got funding for this project, I want to say, at least 2 years ago. That's getting ready to go out to bid, and that's to replace the flat roofs over there. The thought is that they will be solar ready when complete. Obviously, we're not going to move forward with solar unless we have some direction on those buildings, but that project is going. The Beatty roof project is going to be going out in fiscal 26. We're in the process of contracting with an architect to do the design of a partial roof replacement, so that project is ongoing.
Will there be solar there?
You know what, I'm not sure. I think that will be part of the work that the architect will be doing. There seems to be a lot of debate on whether or not it makes sense to put solar on that building. So that will be considered as part of that project. The middle school solar project, that is out to bid. The rooftop and canopies out to bid. The canopies are an alternate. If we move forward with the canopies, we need a battery, and so we need to see what the bids come back at. We have 16 vendors that pulled the packet for that project, so that's good news.
Sorry,
for the
CMS?
middle
I know,
school
but
solar.
For both
Roof
components?
It's put out as one request for proposals right now with two parts. So we don't know if right now if they would.
Has to bid on both parts, I guess, or do they bid on both parts?
I don't think they have to bid on both parts. So let's see. I wanted to mention that we heard today that on Wednesday, July 2nd, the State Department of Conservation and Recreation will close Route 126 at Walden Street, both directions, from 5:30 a.m. to noon to accommodate the construction work on the bathhouse. We are in a level 1 lawn watering restriction currently. That means that you can water your lawn 1 day per week on the day that your trash is picked up, meaning no irrigation on Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. And we hope to be able to get by with just the level 1 watering. There was a report that went out sometime this afternoon. I did want to mention that our police department received its reaccreditation, so they are an accredited department for the next 3 years. Again, we started third Thursdays, which is an economic vitality initiative. We did the first third Thursday on June 19th. It was very, very hot that day, but I did see some people out participating in those events. I also wanted to mention, some of you may recall that we have been involved in a class action PFAS settlement. So we will be receiving our first payment in the amount of about $217,000. This is coming from 3M. We will be receiving payments on an annual basis until 2033. This is, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the costs that we have to do PFAS mitigation, but through the work of Chris Carmody, our risk and compliance manager, Alan Cathcart, our Public Works Director, and Melissa Simoncini, who works on water quality in CPW. The three of them did this work, involved us in this class action, and we will be receiving a total from this of $1,233,070. Again, just from 3M. There will also be settlements from DuPont and Tyco, BASF forthcoming. So this is...
This goes to the enterprise fund? It goes to the water?
It will go to
goes
the enterprise
water.
fund,
Okay.
yes.
Yep.
So I think those are the things that I wanted to mention to you this evening.
Quick question.
That's great.
Doug White Construction, is that going as planned?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it is. And we expect, I believe, beneficial use by August 1st. So this project is moving pretty fast. And then there has been one change order requested to date, and the Friends of CC Fields agreed to the change order. So that project is going well.
That's great.
Yeah, very good.
Great.
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 Any further questions for the town manager?
No.
Great. In lieu of liaison reports, unless somebody has something particularly burning, I wanted to just raise the question of, it's a suggestion that we continue the practice of written liaison reports for this coming year, but with an opportunity to do a highlight of something as we go around the room.
Yeah.
So think, 2 to 3 minutes, or even 2 minutes or less, but just pull something out that you think might be useful.
I do want to make one comment about a gift that I've just gave to Wendy, and I just returned from the and Megan. We just returned from the exchange with our sister city in Hokkaido, Japan, and they gave us a gift, which was a wonderful trip. I recommend it to everyone. They gave us a gift, which is typical when we have these types of exchanges. I handed the gift off to Shannon, and it will be displayed downstairs. And what it is it's coasters that are designed with the Ainu people's motif, and the Ainu people are the indigenous people from the Hokkaido island, who've only been recognized by Japan in 2019. So this is quite.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful gift. It's a beautiful design, and you can see it downstairs.
Yeah, culturally, those people are, lived in similar lifestyles to Alaskan Native
That's right.
Americans, or
And they look.
because Hokkaido is very far north, so it's a winter over
It's cold.
people. Yeah,
It's cold.
very.
So, Mark,
It
can I
used to
just-
be. It wasn't cold when we were there.
I actually just want to say one thing, because Terry had given me a heads up about this for Hanscom. There's been a change order request made, the original Hanscom project. The developers are putting in a change request. As you know, that the current project is under review, and there's an environmental assessment going on. But the developers are trying to move forward with a subset of the Navy hangar. And so there was a presentation or discussion last Wednesday, which I was not able to attend. So I'm trying to dig up the details of that. And there may be a request for the select board to draft a letter of comment. I don't know that we need to comment. Other towns have not, but I want to dig into it a little more detail, and maybe, Mark, I can just follow up with you in preparation.
My understanding is
For that.
that they're proposing some kind of development facility for electrical Aircrafters.
No, it's sort of, it's Merlin Corporation, and they want to do some, it's an R&D
Yeah.
development, but they will have aircrafts, but maybe one a day, but,
Yeah.
so it's less invasive, but still, it's a change that we might be aware of.
Wendy,
It's in addition to the 17 other hangars they're planning.
No,
to
no,
do.
no. So, and by the way, that other project, one of the questions is, well, you're moving this one forward, but what about the larger project? They fully intend to move forward with a larger
Yeah.
project, but it will move forward in phases. And that expected feedback on that assessment is going to be later in the fall. But,
Elisa Sandoval attended that
Oh,
meeting,
did
so
she?
you could
Because
connect with
I
her.
outreached to Ann Clifford, but she's out.
Yeah,
So
Elisa.
Okay, I'll talk.
Paul.
Great.
Pseudo liaison report, so I'm sort of on the hot seat with the 2229 negotiation. As I said, we had the first meeting today. Mina Markarius had suggested, and EPA has accepted, that the next meeting will be in October, and by that time, they will have some position statements, some negotiation parameters from the town. So we are going to have to need an executive session between now, sometime in the next
Yeah.
month or two, to kind of meet with Mina to kind of go over what those
Okay.
pieces look like. So, but the good news is it's moving along.
Moving forward, yeah.
And there's a willingness to kind of sit down and negotiate
Yeah.
everything.
Good.
Well, when you came on the select board, people talk about being on the hot seat.
Yeah, sure.
You didn't know it was going to be literally sitting here, though, on this,
In this room.
yeah, on the actual hot seat. So,
It's a sweaty hot seat.
It is, a sweaty seat.
I may
Okay.
not be able
Right.
to get up.
So can I offer a motion to adjourn?
Yes?
Yes, you may.
All right.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for.